Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Tuesday, December 10th, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Education. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Victoria Boucher. Roll call.
Ms. Christine Bello.
Here.
Ms. Thomasina Bello.
Here.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher.
Here.
Ms. Victoria Boucher.
Here.
Mr. Bergarelli.
Present.
Mr. Doré.
Present.
Mr. Howard. Ms. Politi.
Here.
Mr. Stewart.
Here.
So good evening, everyone. Tonight we have, do I see Kristen? Yes, there she is. Kristen Johnson is going to present to us on the winter card contest.
Good evening. I know they're just getting the PowerPoint presentation up. Thank you so much. Good evening. I'm Kristen Johnson. I'm the Director of Fine and Performing Arts for the Newburgh and Large City School District. And it is with great pleasure and excitement that I stand before you today to announce our 5 winners of the 11th Annual Superintendent's Winter Card Contest. This event showcases the incredible artistic talents of our students. This year, we received over 50 student entries for the card contest. It made it really, really difficult. These pieces of art reflect not only our students' artistic talents, but they also beautifully capture the spirit of the season. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to all the students for their hard work and dedication. I also want to acknowledge the support of the teachers, parents, families, and everyone who encouraged these young artists. Oh, it worked. It's so exciting. Our first artist is a 3rd grade student from Guinea Avenue School, and their art teacher is Ms. Kelsey Kinlan. Their piece is entitled Wonderful Winterland. Please welcome and join me in congratulating Ava Torres. And this is Ava's work.
If you guys can just also stay up front so we can then take a picture with them and we can have them stay there.
And all students will receive copies of their cards, but they're also up here for the audience to enjoy as well. So Ava, there's yours all the way on the left. This is so exciting. Our second artist is a 3rd grade student at Fostertown Elementary. Their art teacher is Miss Kayla Allen. I don't know if he's here, but Anthony Palacios Orellana, if you're here, please come on up. But if not, please enjoy this beautiful artwork. Our third artist is a 1st grade student from Gardnertown Leadership Academy, and their art teacher is Ms. Claudine DeLagle. Their piece is entitled Merry Christmas, Santa Claus. Please welcome and help me congratulate Emma Stazak. Our 4th artist is a 12th grade student from NFA main campus, and their photography art teacher is Miss Gina Carbone. Their piece is entitled Chocolate by a Campfire. Please help me congratulate Josiah Herring. Our 5th and final artist is an 11th grade student from NFA main campus, and their art teacher is Miss Catherine Gabriel. Their piece is entitled Winter Spirit. Please welcome Guillermo Guevara.
Thank you, artist. And if there are teachers here that also came to celebrate with, you guys can join us in the center for a picture. That would be great. Ms. Bello?
And principals too, Ms. Peterson?
We could probably go back. Let's go back and get a little, so we have a little bit more space. Sure. Okay, let's go back. You can go all the way back to that end there. Yeah.
In closing, I also just want to acknowledge our honorable mentions. They all did such a wonderful job. And let's give one more a round of applause for our winners. They did such a wonderful job. Thank you.
Next, we have public comment on agenda items. Do we have anyone signed up?
Yes, ma'am. The first person signed up to speak on agenda items is Mr. Dennis Grant.
Good evening, I'm Dennis Grant. I have a question. One of the agenda items, the principal clerk position for the food service department. Could you please give me a description? Is it just clerical work, or is it supervision, decision-making, record-keeping, budgeting, purchase orders, and the like for the food service department? And also, we honestly would like to know the purpose in being notified within 24 hours. I saw something online about it, as far as being notified 24 hours of any alleged criminal acts on school premises or school-sponsored events. The school board doesn't respond like the TV show First 48. So the school board as a collective are not first responders. I'm a first responder. And using the phrase criminal acts, no bueno. This district has scholars, not prisoners. And the notion to state the phrase criminal acts concerns me, Madam President, about your objectivity, your verbal range, and respect about our school district. Does knowing within that time frame really get you a jump start, and I'm speaking as the collective school board, give you a jump start on policy development while the investigation is still going on? Don't think that this board or any school board can turn over policy quickly enough or quickly without gathering all pertinent information. So I would suggest, if you vote yes to be aware of the incident, not criminal act, please refrain from unnecessary gossip and chatter and wait until the investigation is completed before reviewing policy. And the switch between shall and will, tomato. But if no agenda setting, and this is what you had in there about the agenda setting, If no agenda-setting meeting takes place between the board president, superintendent of schools, and the clerk of the board, then there will be no meeting? I'm gonna repeat that. If no agenda-setting meeting takes place between the board president, superintendent of schools, and the clerk of the board, then there is no meeting? You as board president, you're generous in flexibility, and the superintendent must equally agree to a time to meet. It appears the superintendent has tried to work with you while your availability changes. These are the sacrifices of being the president. You are supposed to steer this board with a clear focus on the district's vision. But I've seen you steer this school board over and over the rumbling streets on the highway. With your unproductive agenda-driven leadership, you will direct this school board in the ditch. Grow up for our scholars and ensure we have our school board meetings, and don't play some down-the-line blame game. Everyone here at times are busy, and everyone here at times are fake busy. Again, grow up. Just grow up. And as far as the will and shall, I shall sit down now.
The next person signed up to speak on agenda items is Miss Erica Perez.
Good evening, Erica Perez, New Windsor. I'm going to make it short. It's not going to be too drawn out. 7.1 under Section G, we yet again have another special education resignation. I continue to come up and speak at how much we are putting our students at a disadvantage, how little we are offering our exceptional learners, how lost in our system our exceptional learners are becoming. This is truly a concern. Like, we are spending millions and hundreds and thousands of dollars in other places, but we are not thinking about our most at-risk children. These are the children that need us the most. We may be all they have. Those educators might be all those students have. They may not have somebody at home who can advocate for them. Parents are a child's first advocate. They're their most crucial voice. But when they don't have that at home, then educators, we fall in those lines. We have to pick up that slack. But we just continuously lose educators in this area. And there just has to be a plan of action. What are we doing to help these students? What are we doing to bring those educators in, those teachers, those paraprofessionals, those aides, those one-on-ones that we truly, crucially need? Some of these children crucially need these services, need these paras. They're getting suspended week after week after week. How are we doing this, but we're still bleeding special education teachers? When are we going to fix that gap? That needs to be fixed. Post-COVID learners, the number of children who need IEP services or extra services has increased immensely since COVID. We all know that. All of our kids were home. They all kind of fell behind. We are trying to play catch up. We are trying to fix 2-3 years where they were lost. They were lost because they were not in person. They did not have somebody there to physically give them all of those services. And now we come back into the classroom and we are still not giving them what they need. We are still not affording them the most appropriate education that they are entitled to. And it's truly unfortunate because the more I talk to educators in other districts, our special education teachers are paid pretty well in comparison. So why? What is going on? Why is this happening? And how are we going to fix it? How are we going to fix it? Because our children just continue to get lost. And somebody needs to step up for them. Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Ms. Starla Burks.
Good evening. I'm Starla Burks, City of Newburgh resident. I'm here to talk about agenda item 7.1. Do I have to give the letter H? Okay. So I'm talking about the the appointing of a hiring of Sade Burks. It was put out there, the agenda was put out there, there was a whole Facebook campaign, all of these things put out there, and there was a Facebook clip put out there of how she conducted herself in a meeting, but had they played that whole clip, they would have seen why she responded the way she responded and how, just defaming her character as a person. Not for nothing, she's in these meetings every Tuesday that there's a meeting here. She comes up here, she speaks, she's passionate. Whether you shut her down or you try to remove her, no one in here can say she's not passionate about these children. And it's not just Black or brown children. She's passionate about all children. She not only has she applied for this job and is getting voted in tonight, because she will be voted in. She is already a teacher's assistant at another school. So the whole matter is it's very disgusting when agendas is put out there and people use it to go against people. People want to say, why this person, why that person, when you guys had a whole sex offender, rapist, and blah, 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 that was already working in the school. You can't say one person is saying that she's a racist because she responds to the characteristics that people put out there. You can say you're not anything, but when your character displays that, that is what you are. So you can't get upset when somebody says, if the shoe fits, wear it. And don't get mad because somebody points out your flaws, because we as parents and as community activists and supporters, we get up here and y'all point out our flaws all the time when y'all can't even come together and vote on simple things. It's simple. It's simple. And for her to have to deal with that backlash off of a Facebook post when she's not the only one who was disrespectful, because said persons called community members assholes and refused to apologize, refused to make any inkling that they did this, but they did it, and it was on video. So how dare someone else come in to try to make it seem like she's such a bad person? And before anyone try to lay claim or throw stones, they should always look at themselves, because the said person who did it should want her to have this job the most, because she took it upon herself to offer her a microwave as if she needed that. This right here, when it's this tit for tat, when things like that are put out on Facebook, that's a reflection of y'all, because those are y'all people. So just remember, when you building a hole and digging a hole for someone else, dig too, because your hole is coming and it may be a lot deeper. And for that to have happened, and for that person to, no one should deal with that. That shouldn't be done on no level. That's unprofessional, it's ridiculous, and yes, because a comment was made about someone being sued. You could be sued, and it could be used against you. So be careful what you put out there, because just because you delete it, it's in cyber world. It still can be affected and still can be used against you. So everyone should be very, very careful, because like I said, when she stands up here, she stands 10 toes for all kids. She wears, and that's my sister, and I'm not saying it because it's my sister, and I tell my sister this, you wear your heart on your sleeve too much. She don't know, she can put on her game face, but when she's passionate, that comes through. Unlike myself, When I stand here and I'm talking to you, and it pisses me off. Because I seen a video clip of a said board member at a nightclub in Newburgh drinking and partying and doing XYZ, but I'm not out there to bash that board member. But they're parlaying and partying in the same city that they claim that you, quote unquote, criminals are being raised in. So if those people can sit on the board, why can't she be a teacher assistant? Why the smear campaign? And I'm pretty sure all of you seen it because a lot of you liked it and a lot of you commented on it, which is even worse. Our children, this district is a reflection of y'all, not just of her. So think about that.
The next person signed up to speak is Ms. Sade Burks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sade Burks, resident of the city of Newburgh. I'm here to speak about item 7.1, obviously myself. I thought long and hard, of course, what will I say when I get up here? First, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity. I can't wait to serve this district and serve the children in this district. Some of the children will be coming from the preschool that I currently work at, and it's going to be a joy to see their faces and continue on educating them. I will not respond to any of the smear campaigns. I will not respond to the video. Again, like the previous resident said, the whole video was not out there. The video where I came back and apologized directly was not put out there. The charge, the police, thankful that I live in a country where people, like some of you on the board, voted a president in that has 32 felonies. If someone can be a president with a felony, I'm sure I can be a TA with the case that was ACD'd. And of course, if you don't know what ACD means the court throws it out because it's a domestic dispute, either between family members or friends. I won't bring up where that domestic dispute come from, but I just encourage you long and hard to think about if you ever lose a parent, and then think about when somebody comes to that parent's funeral and starts chaos. So not only are you granted the opportunity to bury your parent in peace, but you can't bury him because the funeral was cut short. And then think about when said family member comes back a year later. I encourage you all to think about that. Again, I thank you for this opportunity and have a good night.
The next person signed up to speak is Ms. Michelle Curtis.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Curtis, resident of Newburgh. I'd like to speak on agenda item 7.1. I'm going to be speaking for Ms. Gabrielle Hill. She couldn't make it today. Greeting, Madam Board President, esteemed school board members, and superintendent and staff. I hope this message finds you as well as we head into the holiday seasons. Due to our Human Rights Commissionary Hero Award ceremony tonight, I will not be able to attend tonight's school board meeting, but I want to take this opportunity to share with you my thoughts about the items on agenda employment of Sade Burks. Recently, I learned that the Newburgh Enlarged School City District is considering hiring Ms. Sade Burks. I was both delighted and honored that a woman of her integrity and passion is being considered as an official part of the education well-being of our scholars. Over the years, Ms. Burks has demonstrated her genuine concern not only for students but for families in the district as she advocates as parents. She is a valuable asset to our community as a whole and the Newburgh Enlarged School District. We would greatly benefit from her today. Compassionate. I will look forward to hearing the good news for her employment. And that's the end of that. And honestly, that's the end of that. I can't read her number and stuff like that, but thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Mr. Amari Shakur.
Hello, everyone, and happy holidays coming up. So I came here to speak on behalf of Ms. Burks, Ms. Sade Burks. I heard she was running for the position, or she was applying for the position, for human resources position. And knowing her, I've known her before she was born, because I know her father and her mother. But since I've known her and the work she puts into her own child, I feel she would be an asset to this community, to the school board, and to our children, all the children in our city, because of who she is. She's a fair person. She stands up for herself, but like I said, she's a fair person. And I heard some of the things, some of the opposition against her, and we have to understand, right now we're in the middle of what you call politics. And so sometimes you have to understand your community. There's a procedure to stop this, it's called voting. And there's an election every year. And Newburgh has 11,000 voters, the city of Newburgh. So saying that if the city of Newburgh is not being recognized, if the city of Newburgh's children are not being properly, administered by this administration and by the school board, then the next step is to go out and vote and make sure these people are not in position. Because that's all it's about. And you have to understand, they're using our children, basically, for political gains and political means and political agendas. And that's the shame of this whole thing, the children. Because the children are our future. And what we put into our future is what we get back. And so right now I'm just saying that I came here for Ms. Burks. I'm going to stay in holiday spirit and say hopefully she's the person that's picked. And like I said, she's an asset to our community. She's an asset to our children. She's an asset to our city. And she will be an asset to this board if she's, I was getting ready to say elected. No, this is not election. If she's hired, if she's employed. So thank you. And on that note, just remember, this is about what's best for our children, the decisions you make tonight. And every night. Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Miss Ann Sullivan.
Hi, I am also here to support the hiring of Sade Burks. I've come to know her over the last few years, working on a number of different things in the city of Newburgh, and I have seen firsthand her passion for uplifting children and their families in this community, and I've seen her dedication to making sure that scholars in the district get an excellent education. I've also worked closely with her on a number of projects, and I've found that she's not only dedicated, but she's really hardworking and reliable, something that I value deeply. And as a teacher myself, I can't imagine any district, especially Newburgh, hiring anyone better. The students, teachers, and staff of the Newburgh Enlarged School District would be very lucky to have Sade Burks working here. Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Miss Tracy Wallace.
Hello. Hi, Tracy. I live in the city of Newburgh. I wanted to address two things on the agenda. First, I'll address Sade Burks, who's on the agenda 7.1. Sade is very passionate. I met her she's a football, City of Newburgh has a football team called the Steelers. We met as moms on there, football moms. I noticed her passion and dedication. And then we met when she was trying to run for the school board. And her connection with people is absolutely amazing. Her connection with the community is amazing. Like, she can connect with anyone. Anyone that had a problem, she sat down with them and she discussed all of the issues in the school, any issues they had, anything they wanted to improve on, anything that they were looking forward to for the school year. She's very, like I said, passionate. And I tend to not look at Facebook as much, but I did not see the Facebook post at all. But the people that are talking are the people that quit. So the person that's spreading it was on the board and quit. So she's not a quitter. She sticks here. She stays here with her son. I know everyone sees her son at these meetings, right? So she brings her son because she's also teaching her son how to advocate for herself, how to advocate for their community. It's 3.5 minutes. So the next part of the agenda that I would like to talk about is the timing for the agenda and non-agenda items. At the last meeting, I was told that on the non-agenda section, I was not allowed to speak on the agenda items. And I looked through all of the policies, and I can't find that anywhere in the policy on anyone not being able to speak about agenda items on at the non-agenda part of the meeting. I also noticed that you have 30 minutes per agenda and non-agenda items. So which means if the first 6 people have 5 minutes, then only 6 people can speak. And so it's unfair that you have many lines to sign up, which means we would have to, either everyone would have to speed through in 2 minutes to let everyone speak, or you would allow allotted time for after the 30 minutes. So I'm asking the board to please vote on extending the time when there are more than 6 people on the agenda, and to be courteous and listen to the community, because a part about being on the school board is listening to your community, is listen to what the community needs. And we can't sit here and follow policies if the policies don't fit what the people are telling you. I learn a lot from the parents that come up here. I learn a lot about the parents that I don't get notifications from the board. You know, there's many things that came up here as subjects, such as the honors program coming out of South. I didn't know that until a parent came up here. There's a lot of parents that voice about incidents that occur. There's a lot of awards that come out here that I don't even know we have in some of these schools. So there's a lot of information that we do receive from the parents and we do receive from the community. So I'm asking you to please extend the 30 minutes on the non-agenda and on-agenda items. And I would like some policy clarification on whether or not I can speak on agenda items in the non-agenda section, because we only have 5 minutes, and I do want to address the policies that are set forth, because it's the policies that are going to justify what we can and can't do within these schools. I did notice that the Citizen Advisory Committee is on there, still on the policies, and we have yet to have a Citizens Advisory Committee, and that is definitely on the policies. So I would just like some clarification on the time extension and speaking. Thank you.
Now move on to non-agenda items. The first person signed up to speak on non-agenda items is Mr. Dennis Grant.
Hello again. We teach our children to play well with others. But when I see this school board, that still remains empty piety. Because who are the others? Not so much the board members and superintendent and the staff. Could it still be the cabal of voters who remain abiding by their very stale plot to remove our superintendent or make her time here extremely uncomfortable? Also, question. Have all the new board members finished their board member certifications yet? Several months ago, it was the school board president requesting a blind school district financial audit. Your blind leadership here, madam, can't be compensated by your blind faith that this district has rampant shenanigans afoot. Many times here, Madam President, your presence is the shenanigans that ought to be removed with a foot. Thank you.
The next person signed up on non-agenda items is Miss Erica Perez.
Hello again. There are a few bullet points I wanted to touch base on. First and most important is I understand that it is fixed at the moment, but earlier this year there was an issue with our student transcripts where the GPAs and class rankings for quite a large number of students was inaccurate, and some students had to have their transcripts sent to their prospective colleges 2 to 3 times. One student I know for sure finally got it corrected by the 3rd time. So I want to know what we are going to do going forth to make sure that this is prevented for future years, because those GPAs and those class rankings play a significant role into our students' financial packages. So, you know, if they're filing for early acceptance, they're getting their early applications and everything in, you know, we really need to ensure that all of that information is correct. Otherwise, students could potentially lose funding or may not get accepted to those colleges of choice that they would like. Again, luckily, the few students that I know were able to get everything fixed, but it took a whole lot of mom calling student going down there, mom calling student going down there. So we really need to have a plan of action to help prevent this from going in the future, because I do worry about the potential financial packages that students could be offered or not offered based on their academic progress. Also, you know, those students could be applying for honors programs, and obviously they need a specific GPA to get in there. So we don't want to prevent these children from getting into honors college programs when it's really not their fault. The next thing I wanted to touch base on is we have yet to find out any information on what we are doing going forward with our football players. We haven't heard anything. Students are still suffering the backlash of this. A lot of our seniors were ripped of their chance to have their senior moments. It was ripped away from senior parents. You know, they weren't even acknowledged. This all happened at the end of their season. They played a really hard season, and then actions that happened at the end ruined the entire thing for everyone, for every single one of those students, and not every single one of those students was involved, and that's not fair to them. You know, and again, we have athletic scholars that are trying to go to schools for football. Now, what did that do to them? How many of them are suffering consequences that they can't come back from because of this? Okay, and what is the plan of action going forward? How can we prevent this in the future so that our students never have to go through this again? Because it is not fair to our students, and we are here for them. They are paying heavy, heavy consequences for things that could have been prevented. So it's really distressing to still have no information. You know, I know it's the off season, but a lot of these scholars should be getting ready to gear up for, you know, workouts and preseason. What's going on? What do we know? Is there anything going forward? And can parents please know what's going to happen and how we're going to prevent this for future circumstances? And my last thing I wanted to touch base on, once again, exceptional learners. We really, really, really need to get a grasp on action plans and how to prevent students from suffering consequences from short-staffed or, parents not knowing their child's rights. We have a lot of parents who do not know their child's rights, and they're easily told that, hey, they're not going to qualify for testing, so do you really want this testing? Yeah, they do. They do, because something is still missing. And if they are asking for something, it is their right to ask, and it is that child's right for us to test and find out how we can best service our children. Not all children learn the same, and without acknowledging those parents' requests, without thinking about that whole child, we're never going to get anywhere with them. We need to do better.
Ms. Peterson?
So I'm going to respond to some of the things that were in that. In terms of GPA and correction, there was a concern with how GPA was calculated. So the counselor and Mrs. Soto did meet with that parent and child to talk about how final GPA is calculated. So I want to be clear to the community that the administration and the school has spent an incredible amount of time to ensure that GPAs are correct. However, one thing that we do need to follow up, which I have asked Dr. Soto to put in the next year's charting your course, to explain to students and parents how GPAs are calculated. So she's working in that, and that is going to be in the next portion of charting your course. In terms, we're definitely saddened when people decide to retire, which they have that right to do, and we are aware and are also concerned in working with units around the recruitment processes that we do have for special ed. It has been something that we have been utilizing. I just want the community and the board to know that special education vacancies are not just a Newburgh problem. It is a nationwide issue. If we are a part of educational news, in New York City, there was actually a rally that also was held about the amount of special ed vacancies. The certification around special educators in general is extremely difficult. There have been appeals to the state, so the recruitment of special educators. So I don't want the community or the board to feel that this is just a Newburgh issue. This is a nationwide issue regarding special education. We have a certification issue in New York State, which NYSED also rallied the governor around certification. So I just want to be clear with the community, and I know, Mr. Shaw, if there was something that could be said about the football incident.
Due process does take time. There are issues regarding students, regarding employees. There are privacy rights at issue, and the process has to take its course. And the process goes up to the Board of Ed ultimately, and they have to have a certain detachment from the facts for due process to be served appropriately. So that's where we are, still in process.
The next person signed up to speak on non-agenda items is Mr. Jeff Ehlers.
Jeff Ehlers, New Windsor. 2 weeks ago, I was up here and I asked if the Newburgh football players would be allowed to be nominated and play in the Section 9 Exceptional Senior Bowl. And I was told at that time by the superintendent, we will have the athletic department look into winter ball and the recognition ceremonies. We will have a response for that. Well, I'm glad I wasn't holding my breath, because it's been 2 weeks and I didn't hear a thing about it from this district. So I had to take it upon myself to reach out to the Section 9 Coaches Association, email them. I found out when the game was prior to that, and then the 4th, I believe it was, I emailed them and found out that NFA will not be participating in the Section 9 Exceptional Senior Bowl this year. That was the email I received back. So whoever was in charge of making that decision, the superintendent said she was going to respond for that. And that didn't get done. Nobody heard it. There was no robocall. There was no email sent out. There was no what's the app that the kids use for the coaches? No. The coaches send everything. No.
No, they have a different one. I forgot.
The kids weren't noticed. Final forms. Thank you very much, everyone. There was no notification through final forms, nothing like that. Then I also find out that no member of the team is going to be allowed to accept all league or all section honors. So that doesn't just affect seniors. There could be a junior, even a sophomore that had a great season. They're not going to be allowed to do that, okay? This has been going on for almost 7 weeks. You have students and coaches that are still suspended, and you're still punishing kids that didn't have anything to do with it. Nothing, just a blanket punishment. That's a sign of weak leadership, no doubt about it. This is the time of the year when coaches are usually working hard with their players who are being recruited to play in college. All right? With our coaches still suspended and not allowed to talk to the players, there is no doubt that some players will be missing out on scholarships, possibly killing their only chance at college because it's really, really expensive. Who is supposed to fill in the coach's absence? Who is picking up the slack? An assistant coach? Should the athletic director have said, you know what, I'm going to step in and help out these kids. I'm going to talk to colleges that are looking for these kids because it is a cutthroat business. If I'm up for a scholarship and player B is up for a scholarship and it takes anything, any distraction at all, they're going to move on to player B. Oh, you're suspended? We don't want that headache. We're moving on to this one. They're not going to ask why you were suspended. Oh, I was suspended because I walked into a locker room when something was happening. They don't want to hear it. They're done. Some of the players have been suspended for 6 weeks from school for a fight in the locker room. The students involved in fights in the hallways face the same severe penalties. Our kids that are fighting outside the main foyer, are they suspended for 6 weeks? Do you think that's doing the student any good or harm that they're missing that much class time? 6 weeks. And if any of you even think that 2 hours in the afternoon where the kids are getting work delivered to them, not being taught anything, just here's your work. If you think that's helping the students, if they're getting anything out of that, you're out of your mind. Plain and simple, you're out of your mind. Because they're not doing anything. They're going in, they're getting their work. All right, time to go home. And they're going to be behind when they come back to school. I believe the 16th, a lot of them are coming back, if not January. Just, it's awful. I just feel we don't have the students' best interest at heart. It's just awful.
The next person signed up to speak on non-agenda items is Mr. Ronaldo Santiago.
Good evening, members of the board. One thing I just pondered while I was listening to some of the other members of the community pose these questions, especially when it comes to teacher resignations. Now, this being a policy-making body, I was wondering what was the policy as far as exit interviews for these resignations? Because I know we sit here and we ask why are we losing these teachers? I'm wondering if it is a policy to actually have an exit interview, and if so, who reviews that and how often is it reviewed? That's something that just came to my head sitting down and listening. But definitely a question for a policy-making body such as this. The reason I wanted to come up here last meeting I was here, and I implored this board to reach out and contact Pastor Mosel as far as his request to partner with the district to figure out what they can do as far as the activities that are going on across the street from NFA Main. I would like to say that I am thankful for this board reaching out, but here I have a text from Pastor Mosel right here. And it appears that while, yes, the board did reach out to him, and yes, the board did set up a meeting, once Pastor Mosel came to the meeting, apparently it was canceled last minute. So now we've stepped up from ignoring the community to actually playing these type of games with the community. Now, I perfectly understand that scheduling conflicts can happen, and I'm willing to chalk this up to a last-minute conflict that could not be avoided. But this is pretty much the first time this man was ignored. The second time, he was canceled at the last minute. From what he tells me, there's another meeting set up for December 17th, and I'm really, really asking this board to give this man his time. And I'm really hoping that we can take this, a problem that was generated by a couple of students, that we can use this as a teaching moment for those students. Look, sometimes kids get into trouble. It happens. They're kids. But it is our jobs to be educators and educate why this is a problem and why they should learn from these incidents. This man is not asking to prosecute our students. He's asking for a teachable moment. And I'm really imploring this board to give it to him. Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak on non-agenda items is Ms. Tracy Wallace.
Hi, again. Let me take this out. So the non-agenda items, I wanted to address the exceptional learners comment from Ms. Peterson. In thinking about strategic planning and exceptional learners, I mean, it's just a suggestion. If I see the city school district as its own. I never try to compare the city school district. I know sometimes board members or other people say, well, New York City's doing this, or we're doing better than some other places. But I just really focus on the kids that we have in front of us and the kids that we're in charge of. Oftentimes my kids say, well, this kid did this. And oftentimes I say, well, I'm only in charge of you. So that's kind of where I'm driven when I come to the board, is that I focus on the kids in the district. And so my opinion on the strategic planning for exceptional learners is, is there a way that you can raise wages, think about incentives, bonuses, paying for certifications, offering training, some kind of strategic planning to fill the need. Like, I'm aware of the budget already set, but I don't know, HR is not my wheelhouse, but, if there's a way to, fill at least some of the need in the exceptional learners, I would request for exceptional learners to meet and with their team and think of ways such as certification, training, anything that you could pay that the Newburgh and Large City School offer above and beyond anywhere else, and we could be that role model for New York State. That's for that one. The other that I wanted to talk about was, there was a board member last week that made a really, really important comment, and of course I can't say this board member's name. I'm not against the board members. I actually want to work with the board members as much as I can, and the administration. But my confusion is, and I didn't know this until the board member said it, that the board members, now I know, are not allowed to answer the public via email, because that's what a board member had stated. Again, I'm not on the board, so I don't know those rules until one of you come out and state it. So then my question is, we're now limited to our 5 minutes. We're now limited to non-agenda and agenda, and we can't ask you via email. So how do we ask you a question and get it answered? Is it only through the administration? Because there's the school board and there's the administration. And I would like to work with both, but if only one can answer, it's not fair that I don't get the other answer. It's sort of like politics, as someone says, right? You want to get both sides, Republican and Democrat, to come to a reasoning so that you can find a solution. And I always want to find a solution to make sure that the students are getting what they need. And I can't come to that solution if I look at policies and procedures and I'm not on the board. And I want to know as a regular person, how can I defend something that I believe in if I don't have the answers from the board that I need? And if the administration says something and then the board comes and then there's a quarrel between the board and the administration, well, I don't know the board's side, so I'm only getting what you discuss here. I'm not getting the answers. So the questions, I'm running out of time. The questions that I have is, one, how do you respond to someone? Because you can't via email. Two, are we restricted to our comments here to get those questions answered? And another question, and I don't know if this is proper, this is not against the administration at all, but I do want a general board answer, is I would like to know personally, not even personally, I would like to know for the community how in each school, how many kids are on tier 2? That was a question I wanted to ask the board. How many kids are on tier 2? How many kids are getting support? Because I do see tier 1 models in other places that are working well, and I don't want to work against the administration. In fact, I would like a community advisory board so that we can have community talk about these things and maybe can address the board in that way. So I'm not asking for a community advisory committee against anyone. I'm actually trying to connect everyone together. And then, are the community members allowed to attend the committee meetings although they don't have speaking rights? I know that previous board members allowed that. I would like to attend committees, even though I don't have a speaking right, just to see your process and see, what you're doing in the committees, so that as a committee, if we had a citizen advisory committee, we could learn from those committees and how you debate and how you do that process so that we can learn, so that we can all work together. Thank you.
Ms. Peterson.
I just want to clarify what my statement was. I wasn't comparing our students to other districts and what happens in other districts. What my comment was in reference to was staffing and employment and the available amount of applicants with the proper certification for special education. So Newburgh is unique. There's no place on earth like Newburgh, like my dad used to always say. So there's not it's not about our students. It's about, there's only so many certified special education teachers in New York State. The certification for secondary and special education is even that much more complicated because you basically have to have 2 certifications. So what I was saying is that the pool of applicants and that plan, we have sat down as an executive cabinet to really look at special ed, what our need is, and tried to come up with different methods, communications with higher education institutions to kind of really look at our continuum, Mr. Barrett would get continuum, right? To see what our future needs so we can project. As in the budget process, we started to talk a little bit about projecting budget, projecting what our need is so that we can plan for it. So we have done that process. So it's not that I'm comparing our students to other students. It's that there's only so many number of certified special education teachers in New York State. And, sometimes there's a lot of people that choose to retire, which we're also contending with as well.
So I just sent the executive team an article that I'm happy to share with the public and the board that indicates that 40 of the 50 states in this country last year reported severe shortages in special education. This is a nationwide problem. Our shortages are at the secondary level. It's not at the elementary level because of the sophisticated certification process that New York State puts our teachers through. Because we try to provide specialized instruction to kids, you must be certified in English, math, social studies, or science at the secondary level in addition to special ed. Those folks are hard to come by. We have shortages in science, so imagine trying to find a special ed science person. It's a unicorn. They barely exist. There's literally, and again, the article really highlights this, $100,000 person gap between the need in this country versus the college preparation programs. We're not churning out, if that's the right word, churning, or at least having students leave from colleges into the workforce who are certified in special education. I've been doing this 33 years. I've never had an issue. This is a post-COVID problem that I've never experienced in my entire career. I used to get 20, 30 applicants for a position. I might get 2 now. So those are the realities we're facing, and Ms. Peterson described very broadly, but we have a very detailed action plan about how we're trying to address this, and it's across all areas.
And there's people also
I lose sleep over this, trust me.
There's also people, you were working with the NTA as well, because they are also very concerned, because it does impact their unit. What I can also say is that the shortage in certain areas does not just cover special ed. There's shortages in ELS, world languages, administration. There's definitely shortages. Education is definitely, has some concerns.
The last person signed up to speak on non-agenda items is Ms. Starla Burks. Okay. Nobody else has signed up, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll turn this over to Ms. Peterson for the superintendent's update.
Good evening, everyone. As we enter into the holiday season, it is a time of reflection, gratitude, and unity. This season is a reminder of what can be accomplished when we come together with a shared purpose and the spirit of collaboration. Whether it's families gathering, communities celebrating, or organizations unifying for a common cause, this time of the year demonstrates the power of connection and the importance of focusing on what truly matters. Like many other communities, our community faces complex challenges. While the diversity of thought is its strength, it must be paired with mutual respect and collaboration to move forward effectively. Unfortunately, in recent months, certain discussions have pulled us away from a shared mission. While these topics may be important in their own right, the disproportionate focus on them has consumed valuable time and energy that can be directed towards addressing the pressing needs of our students and staff. This is especially true regarding the ongoing challenges with our policy review. As Deputy Superintendent, I fully acknowledge that policy development and oversight at its core are the responsibility of the board. At the same time, the successful implementation of these policies rests with the administration. It is critical that the collaboration between the board and the administration not only is acknowledged, but is respected. It is vital to the success of this district. Over the past 3 years, we have repeatedly reviewed the same policy areas. This has created some challenges. The administration has made multiple recommendations, granted both an expertise and experience to shape these policies in ways that align to district goals, that comply with federal laws and honor existing bargaining agreements. We approach our roles with deep commitment to success of this district, and it is disheartening when the contributions are not given the weight that they deserve. Executive administration is ready to revisit these recommendations and engage in further discussions. However, the continued cycle of revisiting the same unresolved policies diverts attention from other policies that require a more urgent review and the action of the district for its well-being. Time spent on repetitive debates comes at the cost of progress directly benefiting our students, faculty, and staff. Let me be clear. While the policies fall under the authority, the successful implementation depends on the administration. We can express concerns such as conflicts with law, contracts, and district goals. I urge you to carefully consider those decisions, whether these decisions are truly in the district's best interest. I ask each of you, especially during the season of thought and of giving and gratitude, to reflect on the purpose that brought you to this table. Our students, faculty, administration, faculty, and staff cannot afford for us to remain stalled by the division or distracted by matters that do not serve their immediate needs. They are watching us, and they need us to show them that we can be unified, that we can collaborate, and we can achieve district goals. Thank you, and I wish you all a joyful and restorative holiday season. Let's make this upcoming year one of purpose, progress, and partnership. Now I would like to bring Kimberly Roaring. Comment?
Yes, can I ask a question based on what you just spoke about?
Sure.
Was that from you or was that the superintendent?
That's my comments.
Okay, so I'm glad you talked about policy. I need some clarification because I hear what you were talking about, but perhaps if you can explain it a little better, maybe the public can understand it even more and even me. So when we talk about policy and you talked about implementation, how does that relate to regulations and how does that relate to legal aspects of a policy?
So I know during the policy section, there's several policies that are up for comment tonight. I will definitely go into detail. I think the spirit of my message as I was sitting and I was writing it, and I think that it was expressed through a couple speakers tonight. I think that we have to move forward if we are going to, and I think to a certain extent we have, but I think that there's certain things that we keep on going over that are taking away from some of the things that we need to resolve. As the district selected representative around policy, I felt that it was important that we talk a little bit about how the committee works, what we are kind of slated to do. I will review that during the time when that discussion comes up. Policy is about governance. The development of the policy and the oversight, we definitely want to make sure the board is aware of its 2140 policy that talks about what policy development is, and it can clarify what it is and what it isn't. We, as administration, have to take your policies and put it into action, so to speak, in the district. So you can have a general policy. We have to make sure the policy can be done within the district. We also, by law, have certifications where we have to ensure that we're abiding by what New York State has told us about administration around certain areas. So if your policy comes into conflict with law, or if your policy comes in conflict with what our bargaining agreement is, you need to be aware of that before you decide upon a policy. So the collaboration is important. Communication is important, because at the end of the day, I know it's no intent of a board member to make a policy that we can't implement. I know that that's not the intent. If you don't want to follow the recommendations of administration, that is your choice, but does it benefit students in the community? So I think that when we come to some of the policies this evening that I have been an executive member of the board. I think that some of these policies, I think that I've been on the floor discussing for close to 4 years. So, there are a lot of policies that we need to review. There's also policies that are recommended for review from our bargaining units, and as a part of our shared decision-making, they ask us to review things because certain policies of the board impact their management and communication with students. We are not getting to those things. So as for probably the last 3 years, I've been a part of policy committee, I've been reviewing the same policies. So for me, as professionally, and also as a person that also has a stake, I live in this community, we need to kind of think about that as a governing body, that we have not moved forward on a process that we are paying for through NSBA. So we're paying for a process as a district through NSBA to review policies that we have not reviewed. So I think that we need to, as we reflect, we need to reflect on that. And is that really why we came here, to talk about the same 4 policies? I need us to all kind of think about that. Mrs. Roaring has an update on the budget.
Good evening. We have officially started looking at our budget for next year. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the process we use to get there. And we'll start providing regular updates to you all in the new year about where we are. So when we look at our budget process, we review our current staffing and vacancies. We look at any upcoming curriculum changes or new adoptions that we need to be planning for. We're reviewing all of our software instructionally and operationally and making sure the instructional software aligns with New York State standards. Will any of the programs we're currently offering our students be redesigned as we go into the next year? And we begin to gather information on the anticipated increases, particularly across all of our insurances, our transportation contracts, and out-of-district tuition. But we also make sure that we provide opportunities for buildings and departments to make requests. So when we talk about staffing, we are currently completing our staff and reconciliation process. We're continuing to use the more updated district codes that we established 2 years ago. We look at our retirements and our grant-supported positions and make sure that those positions either will be backfilled or any possible changes in the funding levels of our grants and the positions they may cover. We also establish staffing ratios and minimum course enrollments for electives, and our master schedule work has started as that is critical to our staffing projection. Our division and department leaders are going through a modified zero-based budget approach. Oops, I went too far. This means that they're providing very specific information around their equipment needs, whether it's new or replacement, the contract services they're requesting for next year, including those that are required for Ed Law 2D compliance and our cybersecurity. We look at overtime, tuition for out-of-district placements, supplies for classrooms, offices, and custodian, and we also look at professional development plans for next year. We review all of these in detail as we continue through our budget development process to ensure that our spending aligns with our priorities and the revenue we anticipate for next year. So each building principal, division, and department leader has been given the opportunity to make specific requests they feel are needed. These may be minor maintenance requests, or they may be additional funding requests that support the strategic plan and goals of the district or for a specific student program. Minor maintenance requests are generally repairs and things that would not be eligible for building aid. When they make requests for renovation or construction that would be eligible for building aid, we take those requests and we compile them for future construction project proposals. An example of a minor maintenance request would be the elevator overhauls that we've been doing over the last few years in several of our buildings, as well as refinishing the wood floors in some of our stages and gymnasiums. An example of an additional funding request for a specific program is our Big Picture program at NFA West. As we continue through the process, we'll be compiling all of these requests. We're going to continue to review the positions, both retirements and those required for mandated programs. We'll review the requests that have been submitted and determine a priority for those as we continue to move through the process and finalize our revenue projection. We will be preparing an initial look at the 26 expense budget that will come to the board in late January, and we're going to be providing ongoing updates to both the board and our stakeholders as we move through this process. Thank you.
Any questions about where we are in the budget development process?
Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. When can we expect to close out last year? I think we were supposed to have that in October, and here we are, last meeting in December, and we still don't know where the funds are for last year.
So I think in Executive of Audit and Finance, we talked to you about some of the concerns. We're hoping to have word from the auditor, Mrs. Roy, she's looking at me. We're hoping soon to have word from the auditor about the closeout, so we expect before the end of the year that we will have word and be able to close out everything and give a report to the board. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Bugarelli.
Thank you. Real quick question. It was mentioned in the presentation that we would look at staffing for the buildings and everything. I know last year we received a couple of times, roadmap staffing. Is that solely part of the budget process? So we'll see that again, or because I'd like to see that again, and I know that's been requested.
That's definitely a part of our budget process. Currently, right now, what we're doing is we're looking at our current staffing and to make sure that everyone is in the right spot, that we have everyone accounted for. So before Mrs. Roaring starts to roll the budget, we look at staffing, we look at our vacancies. Mrs. Roaring's going to answer some of it.
So as we move through the budget development process, what we've done in the past is provide both updates in terms of staffing changes. So any positions we're looking to add or positions that we're looking to reduce based on what we need for program and mandates. And then we've also provided a staffing listing to the board at the end of the budget process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, just following up on the staffing thing, we got the new CTE building coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to try to project staffing for that ahead of time, get people trained? And I know where stuff is going to be moved from the old location to the new one, but it looks like it's a much bigger complex. So I want to make sure when the building opens up, we're ready to go, basically.
So the district currently has the majority of the programs that are a part of the CTE. What Dr. Manning Campbell has started to do with administration is start to have initial talks about the educational planning, because we know with such an opening of a large building, we need to make sure that we put forth to the community expectations surrounding the opening of the building and then more program locations. So administration is currently working on that. We may, as a part of this budget process, recommend to board certain things that we need to have happen in order to make that as successful opening as possible. So we're in the beginning parts of that planning for the building in terms of educational programming. Well, not at the beginning parts, I shouldn't say the beginning. We have been on ongoing talks around it, and in the planning of the building, we incorporated programs that are already existing within NFA Main and NFA North.
Can I just quickly add to that? I think we would anticipate doing early recruitment for the programs that we are establishing as new programs in that building to make sure that we have the staff that we need to run those programs successfully. That would be part of our 25-26 process. And if there is anything we're looking to start before we get into the end of that fiscal year, that would be part of the budget that we would present to the board.
Thank you.
And so now I'll turn it over to the clerk of the board.
Thanks, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from November 26th.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Point of order, ma'am. You need to put it on the floor first.
Sorry. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Thomasina Bello.
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher.
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher.
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli.
Yes.
Mr. Doré.
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Ms. Politi.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello.
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you. Okay, now, item 6.1. Oh, Ms. Boucher.
I just want to make a general note for the board, something we discussed in personnel, that on any item of the agenda, if any of us have a question about an employee, employment history, any of that, and it's asked on the floor, administration will not be able to answer. So if any of us do have a question, we either need to table and speak and vote on it after executive session or call executive session before we vote. Just want to make that general note.
Okay, item 6.1. Notification of sex offenders, policy 5450.1. Discussion. Mr. Bugarelli.
Thank you, Madam President. This item has come up again. We've discussed this several times. We voted on it not that long ago. I don't know what the issue is in Newburgh that we think we have to change this policy. I drew a nice little circle on the map around Newburgh encompassing other school districts, and these are the districts and whether they conform with New York State recommended policy the way we recommend it. Poughkeepsie, yes, they do. New Paltz, solely the discretion of the superintendent, but it is on the agenda to approve the policy that's in line with ours. Marlborough, yes. Warwick, yes. Valley Central, yes. Pine Bush, yes. Kingston, superintendent discretion. Washingtonville, superintendent discretion. Monroe Woodbury, yes. Cornwall, superintendent discretion. Beacon, yes. Walk Hill, superintendent discretion. Did I say Walk Hill twice? I said Warwick and Walk Hill. Is superintendent discretion, and Middletown is yes. So once again, we're looking to change something that we've already gone over a few months ago with most of these board members here, and I don't see what's going on in Newburgh that we have to change it. The superintendent's personal policy can be no one gets on school grounds unless the law demands it. So I don't know why we have to bring this up for discussion again. Maybe we can explain.
Ms. Politi. Oh. Ms. Peterson.
I think that this also kind of goes into some of what I said. I think the recommendation that administration provided to the Board of Education is the reason why there's a lot of confusion in the community around this policy is the policy, if we look at the title of the policy states notification of sex offenders. So in that meaning of notification, the body of the policy is in reference to how the school district notifies parents about sex offenders. So if that's the case of the policy, the special circumstance that is embedded within the policy actually it needs to go into different areas of policies of the board. So if I look at different things in terms of bullet 1 that is in here, bullet 1, perhaps it should be in another policy altogether, or perhaps it should be a regulation because it is in reference to instruction. Bullet 2 is a violation of some of our bargaining agreements. So that's something that I'm recommending that the board revisit in policy committee, and we can discuss that further. Bullet 3, I think that the portion of this, because it talks about actual visitation, should be attached to the school visits policy that we have that describes how people get on school grounds, and perhaps should also be added to the code of conduct, because their code of conduct is what governs how students, parents, staff behave on school grounds. So perhaps that should be a part of that policy. I think that there's an alarming fact if I'm a parent and I feel as if a sex offender is going to be allowed on property, that is alarming. And I would not want that to happen. It does not occur, but the way that it is in this policy, it makes it seem that way. A part of our visitor management policy and our screening does not allow that to happen. So in my recommendation that I made to the board, I crossed out this entire section because it doesn't belong, in my opinion and administration's opinion, in this policy, because this policy is in reference to notification of offenders. So the administration's recommendation is that perhaps this goes back and it's re-spoken about, and maybe those adjustments are made, because I think that there has been so much discussion about it, because it is confusing, because it's not in the appropriate place in policy.
Ms. Boucher? Oh, Ms. Politi?
So, Madam President, I know that you didn't collaborate with the board before putting these items on because I was not contacted, but did you collaborate with legal before making these adjustments and putting them on?
This came from the policy committee, and yes, legal was present. The committee members were present. Administration did not show up.
And Mr. Shaw, can you please tell us what the recommendation was by legal?
My partner, Margot May, was at the meeting, so I don't know exactly what her comments were at that time. I do know that the point about these items being under the notification of sex offenders, it may be misplaced. Maybe there should be a distribution. And also, it may make sense to have further study of it and further legal input. We did reach out to school boards to see whether or not they have any models that go into the difficult issues that are addressed here. Not to say there isn't importance to these points and consideration as to who the decision makers ought to be. But for a first reading, it's certainly worthy to raise the issues and then decide if it will be distributed, and then make the very tough decisions on the legal issues, knowing that there is not a lot of case law about this.
Mr. Howard? Ms. Boucher?
Thank you. So I am on the policy committee, so I was privy. We did receive an email on Sunday before the policy committee meeting with Christine's recommendation, and we did have conversation the entire week up until 5:59 p.m., literally when the policy committee met. And that included Margot, who is the counsel for the policy. There was a couple things that were just said, and the word does not occur was stated, and I understand, I am ecstatic that this does not occur, but the policy is so that in the event that something, God forbid, were to happen, we have to reflect on policy. The other thing that rang a bell to me was bargaining agreements. I need clarification that there is, are you saying that in some bargaining units there is something regarding this? Because that concerns me. And then there was a third question with that, with the visitor management policy. What is that and how does that work? And can you ensure that that happens in every school all the time with everything that happens on a day-to-day basis?
Ms. Paletti?
Since the policy committee met and got recommendations from Margot May, what were the recommendations from her?
So her recommendation, and I can reference the email, but to my recollection, she had stated that we need to include unless required by law. There is no such thing as a zero tolerance policy for this circumstance because, again, there are students, teachers, staff involved. However, the verbiage, unless required by law, unless you want to, if you can clarify that, that was the recommendation. And she did not speak to striking, but she was okay with this verbiage because she did put together all of these recommendations.
Right, but I'm sure you can see how this has become very redundant, and we've gone through this on how, this really is a NISBA policy. We paid a lot of money to get this recommended to us, and then we keep going over these same policies instead of the other 50 policies that we need to go over from NISBA, and it does create a very ill-spirited attempt to, again, make the district look like they have nefarious intents.
I can speak to that. So that is 100% not the circumstance. I even think, I understand that it appears that way, and a lot of things appear certain ways that they are not. So I want to clarify, in this specific policy.
When you're not abiding by the law and you're insinuating there's criminal
We are
malfeasance.
abiding by the law.
Well, not
We're
when
not
you're going against
insinuating
legal
that whatso- no,
recommendation.
Ms. Paletti, we're not insinuating that whatsoever. There is no insinuation here. This is that if this was the circumstance to come to the district, unless required by law, this is the circumstance. As a parent, when I read the policy, and I read this intently, what I saw is that an exception could be made. No matter who can make that exception, an exception can be made. And I want to make sure that there is no exception unless required by law.
Ms. Peterson?
So in terms of where's the policy, in terms of visit to school, there's a policy that says visit to school. And in that visit schools policy, which is policy 2000, I can't think of it off of the top of my head, I apologize, it describes what can be allowed in a visit to school. Also, our code of conduct is what governs student, parent, and staff behavior on campus. So within our code of conduct, that's also a place where if we wanted to put something like this, that we can say is, in terms of visitor management, we screen parents or any visitor through the Raptor program. Their background check is done. If they do not meet compliance, which I know at one point when we did go over this policy, if they do not meet the requirement, they are escorted off of school property and asked to leave the building. So we talked about what our day-to-day procedures are regarding this. I know that for a point of clarification, Mr. McCoy wanted to let the red comments are recommendations made by the lawyer. The blue are recommendations of the committee, just so for a point of clarity. I think the other thing in terms of the bargaining agreement, I will let you know if there's a chance and opportunity with an executive session. I don't want to bargain against ourselves on the floor, so I have to talk to you, an executive, about what my concerns are about bargaining.
Ms. Boucher?
I want to speak in transparency. So there was an event that took place in a school that I was there as a parent. I had invited other people from my family to be there for that event. I know that not every ID was scanned to go into that school. This is where this comes into play, because while I know things happen, seeing that was disturbing to me, because again, I understand planning, and it was a beautiful event. And again, I'm not insinuating anyone that was there had this situation. But how do we know for sure if we're not doing it on a day-to-day basis? And I was witness to that. That's my question. Because again, I entrust the district to take care 11,000 students. If it's happening in the school that I was at, and again, it happened to Mackenzie. So it is a personal situation that happened. My ID was scanned. The person that walked in with me, her ID was scanned. Can you attest if your ID was scanned? It was not. And you were in the school watching the event. And there was no, correct. So again, these things happen, and that's my concern.
I think that, you know, in certain situations when people may know that people are identified, I know we did discuss that. It's something that we can talk about in terms of our procedures on the daily basis with our Director of Security, Anthony Gerasi, to ensure that everyone is scanned. We do go through that process and take a lot of you know, kind of checks to make sure that that is occurring. We pay a lot for Raptor. Raptor is not a cheap system where people's IDs are scanned. We pay a lot for the equipment associated with that. And I encourage, if that situation occurred and your ID is not being scanned, or if you see someone, to please let us know, because we need to ensure with our staff that they're following the procedures. I think that I think that sometimes we're not against each other. We're all trying to protect our students. And if those things are occurring, and if they are not reported, then how can we correct them, right? So we need to be able to correct them, correct that staff member to ensure that they're doing the right thing. We're all imperfect people. We're all human, things happen. We need to make sure that we're checking in with our staff, that if that does occur, that it is corrected. So if it is seen, please report it.
Ms. Boucher?
And that's why I wanted to comment on this, is that there is a personal experience. This is why I went to this policy. And that's why if we have to discuss for the second read and the adoption of it, where this actually belongs, I need to ensure that anyone that walks into any school is scanned. And we know who they are, we know where they're going, we know what they're doing. That just needs to be the blanket policy so that if we have to reference it, it is there to reference.
Ms.
It's inferred that some of us have a preference to allow sex offenders in our schools. No one here wants sex offenders in our school. However, we discussed this at length a year ago, that this allows for more information. And it should be something that's discussed with the superintendent. It should be discussed among us before it's out here on the floor. This is a waste of time, again.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Thank you. I hear what you're saying about the scanning and everything. Nowhere during our policy meeting, nor in any of these policy updates, does it say anything about that. This is all about taking away. No, you're saying, but that's not in here. So we didn't discuss that, but you're saying that's your big concern too. But that's not in here. That's not addressed in here, and that wasn't brought up at the policy meeting either. This is taking away the superintendent's authority to decide with the probation officer, with parole officer, on who is allowed and to what degree they're allowed. That's a different conversation, and that's, you know, I agree with that.
I just want to clarify what my recommendation was. My recommendation is if this is something that needs to go in policy, perhaps it's a different policy it should be going into. Not the notification, but maybe perhaps the board, as a part of its review of the 2000s, which is visits to schools is in the 2000s, that perhaps we put it in there, because then it would make sense regarding what our process is around that. So that is my recommendation.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. So I'm a little confused here. So when we initially started this conversation, which has been almost a 20-minute conversation on something that I think this was not the appropriate place for it, but you made a statement, Madam President, that the central office did not participate in the meeting. And then Ms. Peterson said that she made a recommendation, a suggestion to the committee. So my thing is, and then with this policy being misplaced, with some of this stuff needed to be embedded in other places, wouldn't that be a conversation that would be had prior to this? And if you indeed did make the recommendation to the committee, was it received or was it not received? And on top of that, we spend a lot of money with NSBA, going over our policies. We spent, I believe when Mr. Forger was as deputy superintendent, we talked about using them for the purpose because we were overloaded, we were backloaded, and we needed to come up to date. So if we get policies from NSBA for the review and they go through, why do we pick it apart when it comes here?
Ms. Boucher?
So that was brought up in the policy meeting, and they have not gotten through much of the review. So we have gotten up to the 2000s for policy. So that was brought up in the policy committee, and we discussed how we need to address what needs to be changed for whatever reason when it's brought to us. And Mr. McCoy did send the committee what has been reviewed already. So we do have that. But we have like up to 9,000, and right now they only have reviewed up to 2,000. So it's going to be an ongoing process.
Ms. Peterson?
So I just want to, for a point of clarification for the community, if we want to look at the visit schools policy, it's policy 1600.
Mr. Shaw?
I'd like to address Mr. Howard's point. NSBA does have a very extensive policy service. On this issue, they only have a policy on notification. They don't get into the issues that are now being reviewed. And as I mentioned before, there is not a lot of case law, but there's a lot of contingent liability based upon exactly how the wording will be. This is a first reading on a policy. There's a reason why most policies go through a couple of readings. In some districts, they go through 4 or 5 before they get sued or not get sued. So I think it makes sense to place things where they ought to be, policy-wise, and also perhaps be a little clearer about the do's and don'ts from a legal perspective, and to either put it back to the policy committee or have recommendations made to the board for a second reading.
In that process, it needs to be more collaborative. I mean, we need to listen to each other. We need to listen what the recommendations are coming from our legal, or what is coming from our central office, and then we work it out together. And some of this stuff needs to be embedded in other policies. That needs to be done also. But when we come out here on the floor and spend 25 minutes on something that should have been discussed differently prior to coming here, it becomes it's ridiculous to me.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
I'd like to note, Mr. Howard, that I watched the policy committee. They read any recommendations from the administration out loud, whatever was emailed to them for those policies. They discussed it with the lawyer, and then a recommendation was made. So they had that discussion, and the policy committee voted for these to be brought to us for the first read. So it was discussed.
Even the idea of these need to be embedded in other policies?
That was just brought up today.
Ms. Peterson?
So I think that, and this goes back to my initial statement this evening about how we all need to collaborate. And I think that sometimes there's offense and misunderstanding and a lack of communication going on. Mrs. Victoria Boucher talked about the amount of emails that went back and forth. Our recommendations for what's on policy committee came in on Sunday. My initial setting of the meeting with Mrs. Bello, we discussed at that time that for the first policy committee, do we want to go over NSBA policy review? I know we sat and we spent some time speaking when we had a brief conversation with Mr. McCoy, myself, and Mrs. Bello regarding how policy goes, how the policy committee is usually run, and how we were in the midst of a policy review. We were given on Sunday the recommendations of what policies needed to be changed. So Dr. Manning Campbell and I went through and we made our recommendations, though I know many of these policies we have discussed several times. We still gave our recommendations to Mrs. Bello, to the committee. We understand, as I've said, that policy is with the board. We do make recommendations. Usually when that happens, there is the actual clean policy, the recommended policy of the changes, and the administration. Ours was not included in the agenda. So usually when that happens, we are unclear or unsure whether or not to participate, because the committee meetings are of the board. They are not administrative meetings. And I can say that I do not want to sit at a meeting where I'm not going to be able to participate. So, and that may not have been the intent, but it just so happens, and that you could say, oh, that never was our intent. However, when our recommendations are excluded, then we don't get to have this type of, included, then we don't have to have these kind of conversations. And I think that that is what went to my original communication, that we all have to kind of speak to each other. We have to talk about how committees are going to work. We have to look at the recommendations and some of this information. On the date of this policy committee, I don't know if I would have attended. I was ill, but I don't know if I would have attended because I don't want to be in a position that makes anyone feel uncomfortable about what our input is. It is your committee meeting.
Okay, well, the ultimate goal with this policy was basically to eliminate the special circumstances, and the only other thing we did was add, unless required by law, we would not have this, sex offenders on school grounds. And the ultimate goal here was to reduce any risk, or as limit as much as possible any risk to the district, with our priority being the safety of students and staff there. Now, we did receive, the administration's recommendations, and we brought them to the policy committee. I was stunned that no one from the administration showed up. So, of course you would have been included. We got input from the committee members, we got input from legal, and we wanted input from you. And we did consider what you sent to us written, but like tonight, you're raising totally different questions that were never in what you sent to us. Go ahead, Ms. Peterson.
So the things that I'm bringing up this evening would have been the discussion and discourse that would happen at the policy meeting. When we were notified that our recommendations were not included, Dr. Manning Campbell sought clarification. We still have not received that clarification. I think the fact of the matter is, and the reason why I said that, is that we all need to reflect. We have to reflect to move forward. That might not have been your intent, then you have to communicate. Because the committees are board committees. They are not administrative committees. If there's a question, I know even with audit and finance, there was questions. Me and Mr. Stewart spoke. We got the clarifications. We mutually set the agenda. We have the meetings. That's as simple as it's a mutual respect. I understand that you have questions, concerns that need to be raised. As my role as an administrator, I have questions and concerns that I need to make you and the committee aware of. We have to have that mutual communication because it benefits the larger community. And that's what the administration is asking for.
Okay, and just one other thing I want to say. NYSSBA makes recommendations. They're not the sole authority over us. And what we focused on at our policy meeting were basically local policies that affected the performance of the board and things like that. Go ahead, Ms. Peterson.
So for the community and the board to be aware, NYSSBA is the governing body for School Boards Associations of New York. You are correct in that they are local decisions, but they're policy decisions that have a broader range where the board needs to consider how this will affect future operations in the district. They also want to bring you into understanding. It's up to your discretion to adopt them or not adopt them, but that is a portion of why we're paying. We're paying for the discretion, the changes in the law to seek. Any board policy change that is done, the administration then has to turn that into action. So we want to be on top of our policy changes so that we can project out how that's going to impact the district. So yes, you're correct that they're not set in stone, but I think there's another policy that we'll get to. I'll discuss some of the changes that NYSSBA is recommending. The administration feels like the board should consider, and when we get to that policy, I'll discuss that.
Okay. So are we done with discussion here? Okay, so we'll move to policy 2105, school board access to information and reports. Put this one here. The only change that was made in this policy was that the board be notified before the public. So we put in 24 hours. Any other discussion? Mr. Bugarelli?
Thank you, Madam President. Generally, I mean, we haven't had an issue with being notified about incidents where emergency responders respond to our grounds. We really haven't had issues. And as far as, if we're talking about football again, we didn't hear anything about it until the district really kind of knew there was actually something of substance there. So, that may have not conformed within that 24 hours because an investigation is ongoing, So I think the district has been good with this notification. I don't really know that, locking them down to 24 hours when it takes longer than that sometimes to figure things out of the comment about it.
Okay,
It's
well,
appropriate.
the only thing I would like to say about that is with the most recent incident, we were not made aware for 6 days.
That is not true. Mrs. Bello, I encourage you to go back and check the emails. We definitely notified the board, and I think as a general statement, we notify the board on all instances. So I don't have a concern about what's in the policy because we are in fact already doing that because this is a part of our communication and we can also prepare a report for the board that proves that we are doing that. In terms of the football incident, we notified the board.
Mr. Stewart?
Thank you. In the school law book on page 114, it says that to report to the board violations of regulations in case of insubordination and to suspend an associate assistant or other superintendent, director, or other employees until the next board meeting or such. So they have until the next board meeting to actually notify us according to this.
Ms. Peterson?
And we feel, thank you, Mr. Stewart, for that, and we feel it's important that you are abreast to the events that are happening within the school district. So we do notify. We send you the communications when we do have different things on property. We do notify you about sometimes when we are made aware of events that happen in the community that may affect the school district. To be sure, I actually pulled our communications to make sure that we're actually sending it to board members. We are. So I think that what my concern is that this makes it seem as if we are not communicating. We are communicating with the board.
Ms. Paletti?
And for the record, this is the second attempt tonight by the board president to make it seem as if there are nefarious or ill-spirited things going on behind the scenes.
All I know is that I read it in the news, I saw it on TV.
You should check your email. You should check it more regularly.
I did.
Being notified about something and the details are two different things.
Ms. Boucher?
So yes and yes. We were notified on, I believe it was Tuesday. It was after the weekend, it was on a Tuesday. The issue has, and again, it's a rock and a hard place. This, in my opinion, is not insinuating, it's having a policy to reflect on in case something were to happen moving forward. I looked through all policies, I saw nothing in here that referenced specific events. I want to say that in here there is no mention of criminal activity. Again, it's serious bodily injury or death that involve arson, bomb threats, credible threats of violence without identifying the student or students, bus accidents that result in serious physical injury, significant outbreaks of life-threatening or communicable contagious diseases, etc. It also, there is something in here that says if a board member receives information about incidents of significance, they are to contact the superintendent or designee as soon as possible. So again, I see that as it's communication between all parties. But I don't see the harm in this. We do get the information, we do get the emails, we know what's going on. Again, this is just the policy to go to if we ever were to have that question.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. So, in light of what was just said, we do get notifications. We do get notifications on a regular basis. What this appears to be to me, when you put a caveat in or you put a number in here, 24 hours, you're really looking to set a trap for someone down the line. I mean, being perfectly honest with you, if it's 26 hours or if it's 30 hours, but we are informed. We do get information. But by putting this 24 hours in, to me, it looks like something to be used down the line to trap somebody off. That's just me.
Ms. Boucher.
So Margot did this verbiage. Also, just to add on that, sorry. Because I can tell you, again, full disclosure, the question I was asking was not being received the way I was asking it. So that's why I say until literally 5:59 p.m. When I got here, me and the attorney had that discussion, and then we eventually talked about it on the floor. She was going to reword it, and that's what she did. She's the one that made this verbiage.
So with this new verbiage, if the board is not informed 24 hours, would someone be in violation of this policy?
It would be in violation of the policy. Then the question is, how significant is the violation? What are the circumstances?
So be it what I said, setting it
Mr.
up.
Bear.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to be clear, I did not watch the board, the committee, so I just want to be clear. All the red area is new to this policy, correct? Am I to understand that? And what verbiage did Ms. May provide? All of it or some of it? I'm just needing to understand.
So we had sent in several different variations of what we wanted the policy to state.
Okay.
And she took what everyone had said and gave this. So
And this
literally
is,
every word
to
is.
me, and I have a very small part of this is why I'm speaking up right now, I don't normally, because I'm in charge of health services and to some extent the safety of children under PPS, People Personnel Services. There's two pieces here that concern me, which is where this collaboration needs to come in. Number one is, what is your definition of bodily harm? There are legal definitions of that. I'm not sure you're aware. I'm not sure that you attend here. If I'm going to use the part in special education under Part 201, it is literally a death sentence kind of thing, when you're hospitalized for dismemberment and near death. I mean, there's different standards of bodily harm is. That's why policy is so important. That's a very broad, very vague concept of what bodily harm is meant in this policy. That's number one. Number two, it says that there must be a report of all life-threatening or communicable contagious diseases in the schools. Our obligation under the state law is to provide that information to the Department of Health. We provide on an ongoing basis any outbreaks to the Department of Health in Orange County, who then provides that to the New York State Department of Health. We take our guidance from them as to what we report. I can tell you right now, we have contagious diseases in the school, pertussis or RSV, or those are common, influenza. There was just a recent guidance from the Department of Health about where we are in the outbreak of influenza during the influenza season. I'm not sure what I'm reporting to you. Then I might as well just talk to you every day or report every day, because that's literally how this goes. It's a little too broad, and I don't understand the point. We take our governance from certain bodies who then tell us how we report out and when or if we need to report out to the community. There's sometimes schools that have very specific outbreaks that we must, but again, that guidance comes from the Department of Health, not from me and not from our health service provider, certainly not from the superintendent.
Mr. Shaw.
The definition of serious bodily injury comes from the penal law, and it's also part of child abuse in an educational setting. Same term of art, commonly used in our industry.
Mr. Bugarelli.
Thank you. And to clarify, to say that these are Margot's words, yes, but the policy committee wanted the 24-hour thing in there, and initially it wasn't any violations of code of conduct. That's what we were to be notified over, and we talked about that, and listening to a Walkman on school grounds is a violation of code of conduct. Do we need to know about that? No. So that's why it was changed to something describing more serious, but the 24 hours part is what the policy committee voted on and wanted in there. So that's not, that's what we wanted, not Margot.
Ms. Peterson?
So I just want to bring this is what a committee meeting looks like. We have administration speaking to board members. The public is listening and hearing, so they're hearing our discussion. This is a committee meeting.
We would have appreciated the input at the committee meeting from the administration. Mr. DeRay.
I'm just confused between policy and law. Mr. Stewart read an excerpt from the law that said there's 2 weeks' notice, but we're developing a policy for 24-hour notice. Which is it?
Yes, go ahead. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Stewart was reading from one of the questions in the school law text. It sounded to me like that dealt with the issue of the authority to suspend until a next board meeting, and that's an authority of the superintendent. So I don't know that there is an overriding implication of what he read.
Thank you.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. So for clarification, this red section, did Margot suggest the 24 hours, or did Margot include the 24 hours because that's what the committee wanted included?
Ms. Boucher.
So in our discussion, we had said the 24 hours, and
So Margot didn't, that wasn't something
she
she
incorporated the 24 hours into the legalese. That'd be the word.
Ms. Peterson.
So the policies we were given on Sunday that had this language in it, and the administration reviewed the recommended policies that were provided to us by the committee chair, which I believe is Mrs. Bello, and we made our recommendations based on what her concerns were with the policies that are on this evening's agenda.
The 24 hours was just basic consideration because our phones, our messages, everything was blowing up after the last incident. And we didn't even know what had happened. So something's got to give. I mean, that's just consideration of the board.
So, just for the sake of time, when does the 24-hour time clock start?
I would think it would have started like when the incident occurred, in my opinion.
So without information, so from the time the incident occurred, or when they were notified, or when they had information, when does the 24-hour clock start?
Ms. Boucher.
I would say that. So when the district is aware, that's when the time, for me, that's when the 24 hours. So once they get the initial and the administration or the cabinet or whomever is involved discusses what they discuss, we're then just to be notified, hey, a circumstance happened. We receive emails all the time. I mean, I received an email about blood that was visible in a classroom. So again, we do it already. So I'm not understanding why it's such an issue.
Mr. Stewart.
Instead of the 24 hours, how about as soon as practically possible?
Ms. Peterson.
Just as a point of clarification, I think that in terms of the recommendation to this policy, now that it went through the policy and what's written before us is not what was initially given to us, so I need to make that clear. Based on what is here, there are some concerns around certain definitions and what the expectation would be. And I do think the recommendation, that timeline piece that that was just discussed is a part of the concern, because we can have an event occur in a building, a principal can have a notification and administer discipline. Once we're reviewing that discipline, we can then say, no, further investigation and further action. So that 24 hours sometimes is not at the beginning of the event, it's in the middle of the event where it arises to the level where there is contact. If there's emergency services, different events that happen in the building, we do notify the board, and it is within, but every situation is so different, and we have a large, diverse district. So that is why we are concerned about some elements of this, of what is now currently being presented to us. Okay.
Ms. Boucher? Mr. DeRay?
I'm directing to Victoria here. Have you ever received emails that are false? In other words, the information that an event that's described that isn't exactly the way it happened?
From where? So I could
Perhaps-
attest from
perhaps
district,
a-
I take
perhaps a
district for their
taxpayer.
word. So I take district for their word. Again, I've been in circumstances where I've been told things and I've directly called Onyx or Dr. Manning Campbell. I've done that. I've done it when I've heard it. And I understand that we have to respond a certain type of way. In this circumstance, without saying the event, which I know we're all aware of, I was called by a news reporter and I had no idea something had even happened. So that's my point, is that when I get a phone call and I'm like, I have no comment because I'm never gonna have a comment, but to not even know what they're referring to is what is the problem. And I just, in what we're speaking about time-wise, what would be an acceptable time frame? So if it's, that would be what my question would be.
Excuse me, Mr. Howard, if I may. Within a reasonable time frame, I think Mr. Bergarelli could probably attest, being a law enforcement officer, what happens initially is not exactly what you find out 24 hours later, which is why every time we see a press conference on TV after an event and the public and the media have already judged what's happened, we find out that's not exactly what happened. So this 24 hours is putting the school district in a bind, because they may be reporting something that then they find out at 25 hours may not be true. Yet we have it here, arson. I've been involved in arson investigations that take years. So there's a fire at a school. We think it's arson. Should we be reporting it? I mean, you could just pick this apart. The reality of this is there needs to be a discussion. Event happened, but it seems that every time something happens, we want to re-policy, and I know I just made up a word, but we're going to reenact, or our reaction is to develop a new policy to make sure that never happens again, as opposed to, we have lots of policies, you just told us, 2,000 through 9,000, as opposed to going back and saying, this is the policy, and maybe in this case, school board or the school administration didn't do it correctly. But that doesn't mean we need to rewrite the policy. It means we need to have a discussion and say, this is what we're seeing, and we need to discuss it and make sure this doesn't happen again.
So if there was a fire at a school, you would want to know after the news told you that there was a fire at the school, or would you want to know that it happened from the district?
That's not what I said.
Oh.
I mentioned the word arson. I would like to know if there was a fire at the school. But I don't think you could judge within 24 hours, except if you have the person with the gasoline can and a match, that you know what happened.
But I know there was a fire. At least as a
Okay,
board, we know that it happened.
But you know,
That's my
Victoria,
point.
but we do know if there's a fire. That's the point Mr. Howard made, Mr. Bergarelli
Okay.
made, Ms. Village made. We get notified by the school regularly. This is an event that happened. We can't give you the names. This is a credible threat of violence. We notified the parents. You're making it appear that the school is not communicating, yet they are.
No, that's how you're taking it, and that's how I think some people are taking it, because that's not the way it is. Right now, I went through policies for this specific question, me. There is no policy that says we are to be told anything when it comes to this. Again, we can discuss the verbiage and the way it's laid out as a board, that's fine. But the notion of it is so that we know as a board, the district is gonna communicate with us and it's per policy. We know they do it. No one's discrediting that they don't do it.
Ms. Peterson?
I think that this is a classic case of a communication. I think that when there is the expected communication, and Victoria, we know because we've had conversations, you are a board member people reach out to, you want to be able to respond and support. And I think it's a role issue about what you can respond and support, report out to a community member. And then the district has to keep the validity of its investigation, and we have to also keep operations moving. So sometimes our first priority is to make sure that we are also guiding our administration to ensure the investigation and that the process and your policies and procedures and our regulations are being followed, because they have questions, especially if it is an event of high magnitude. When it's an event of high magnitude, they do reach out and ask for central office support and executive leadership support to ensure that everyone is getting their due process, everyone is going through the steps correctly, that our paperwork is being filed so that it's not litigious in the end. So if there is another laundry list of things, which we do communicate, we want to make sure that we are trying to protect the district from any type of future legality by skipping a process and a point in due process. So I don't have an objection to for there to be notification. In the policy review, you definitely may have seen that. I think that we have to work out what is the meaning? What is the meaning of some of the things that are listed in here and the timing of that?
Mr. Bear?
So again, this is better served to be discussed at an actual policy committee, because we are kind of deconstructing the intent. And the intent is you don't want to be blindsided. I understand that. But again, you have a role to play. We have an important role to play in a lot of this. The way this is written concerns me. And the one area, again, as I read this, is on and off school grounds. We have relationships with 3 municipalities, with the sheriff's office, and state troopers, as well as the district attorney's office. It has taken a long, hard time to develop trust with those different entities. Mr. Forge, who sat in Onyx's chair, spent a lot of time developing trust with those different agencies. This puts us in a very difficult position, because we are often given some information preliminarily, because it may include some of our students or some of our staff, and we are held under strict confidence not to discuss it. We're actually prohibited because you will compromise the investigation. I see this as a complete overreach of this board to have privy to things that I shouldn't even be privy to. And honestly, oftentimes it's held in very tight hands. I don't want to know certain things at certain times because I don't want this information to get out, and so this worries me. This can potentially destroy relationships that are taking years to build, and you're putting us in a very difficult position, because when we're starting to regulate off school ground behavior that the police might be involved in, I think that's an overreach.
Ms. Peterson?
And thank you, Mr. Bear, for bringing up that piece of it. There are certain investigations that have recently occurred that only even certain members of cabinet were even involved in, because it was that confidential. So we notify what we can notify. We try to keep the guidance of what an investigation is, due process, and try to keep ourselves out of litigious situations. So thank you for bringing up that piece.
And no more discussion? Okay, so we'll move to the next. The next item, 6.3, Policy 2160, School District Officer and Employee Code of Conduct. There was basically only one change in this policy, and we changed the employment with the district after leaving the Board of Education from 1 year to 3 years, just as a proactive measure to limit the possibility of quid pro quo during a board member's term. Discussion? Ms. Peterson?
Okay, so in my policy recommendations to the board, I know that we're doing policy review, and there was one point brought up for review, which is the term, the length of when someone can serve. But in my recommendations, I actually brought forth two separate recommendations to the board, that if we look at NISBA's policy recommendations of 2160, it actually asks the board to consider some other legality, or make some recommendations for private employment and future employment. So in the copy that I read to the board, it talks about if a board member or officer or employee shall not engage or solicit or promise private employment when employment or service creates a conflict or impairs the proper discharge of his or her official duties. So it's talking about, as sitting board members, what that would mean. And it also talks about future employment, that a board member cannot come back in front of the board to regain in any relation to any action preceding the application in which he or she is personally participated during the period or his or her service of employment, and what that would do under his consideration. So in the NISBA policy recommendation, it talks about these things, that the board should have discussion regarding future employment and private employment, because it's an ethics policy of the board. So I don't know if that was discussed at the meeting, some of the recommendation. It also talks about how board members are getting this. I know at the beginning of your tenure, Mrs. Bello, you discussed like the onboarding and how board members are made aware of certain policies. Actually, there's a recommendation from NISBA to talk about this policy in particular, because it's the board ethics policy. So I don't know if that was discussed, as well as volunteering and charitable organization and conflicts of interest. So my recommendation is for this to kind of go back and be discussed. So if we are revising this policy, that we revise it one time with the NISBA policy recommendations.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Shaw, I'm curious, in all the districts that you work with and in your association with the districts throughout New York State, what is the norm for this type of requirement, as far as after leaving a board or after in a situation like that? What is the timeline?
I'm most familiar with a one-year period not to do business before the board. That would be what is most common.
Have you seen any 3 years? 2 years?
I don't recall seeing 2 or 3 years. What I do recall is 1 year for coming back and doing business before the board.
Thank you.
Mr. Bugarelli.
Thank you. So in this, I thought just last year was 90 days and we changed it to a year. I don't remember if that actually happened or not, but I thought it did. Changing it to 3 years, it just seems excessive. And as far as the quid pro quo goes, this is a 9-member board. No one member can promise any executive staff member, yeah, sure, I'll get you this or that. It's a 9-member board to vote on things. And in discussions with Margot at the policy meeting, she said she did not know of any time restrictions, which is common for any boards. David, knows a little differently, but the experience is different. But I just think 3 years is really excessive, and it's not what other boards are doing too. So where's it coming from?
Ms. Peterson.
Mr. Shaw, I think that what you said was that, just some clarification on what your last statement was, you spoke about that any member, not necessarily about employment, but any member of a board would not appear in front of the board to do business, which is not necessarily employment. So is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it wasn't in reference to employment, he's talking about business. So that goes into the recommendation I made in terms of future employment. It doesn't talk about just initial employment.
Okay. Moving to the next one. 6.4. Policy 0160, meeting bylaws. Okay. Any discussion? Okay, the change was to also include or invite the vice president to the agenda-setting meetings and/or the deputy superintendent may be invited to participate in agenda setting. And this is if we can't get our schedules together, then, I mean, I can attend remotely, but I thought it'd be great to have the vice president there so that if I'm interrupted for some reason remotely, because I'm doing that while I'm working, then Ms. Boucher could fill me in on anything that I missed.
I guess the part that I have questions on would be the second paragraph where it says if no agenda setting meeting takes place, then there will be no regular meeting. And I guess I will defer to our legal advisor, Mr. Shaw. Are we mandated or are we not mandated to have monthly meetings?
Small city school district must have at least one meeting per month.
Be enforced. We would be in violation of the small cities' rules and regulations, correct? Law. Even bigger word. No, thank you. So that needs to come out.
All right. Anything else on that one? Okay. Oh, Ms. Peterson?
So I know that Dr. Manning Campbell spoke in depth, and I'm sure she will continue to speak in depth around some of the concerns with this. I think also the superintendent of schools is the CEO, so I mean, I know that I am a deputy, and I think it's a good idea for the deputy superintendent and the vice president, because I do feel like we are sometimes the people to build those bridges, and I think it's important, and it has been our practice. I just also want the board to there are gonna be times where the superintendent would not want me in the meeting. And I respect that, because there's conversations that need to be had in the board that need to be between her and the superintendent. So that's why I recommended that they should be invited. But then also, there's certain instances where she cannot defer her authority to me. So I need the board and the community to be aware of that. I know that there have been concerns around virtual agenda setting. There's confidentiality concerns, and I think that a part of it, virtual, does not allow for any confidentiality. So I know that there will be a concern with that as well.
Oh, Mr. DeRay.
The paragraph beginning with every effort shall be made to collaborate. Well, I'm looking at this saying you're changing a policy because of personal issues between you and the superintendent. You're actually doing exactly what I said the last time I spoke. You're revising a policy because of personal issues. And that's not how policy should be revised. Policy should be revised to reflect the greater good, not the personal issues the board president has with the superintendent. And I'm not going to defend either one of you tonight. It's your issue, but it shouldn't be written into policy. And that's what's happening here. And that's wrong.
Ms. Boucher?
What if the verbiage said an invitation shall be made? Because I think because we have discussed the every effort term, we even discussed it in the policy meeting, and I hear you. So that's a broad term, and I agree. So an invitation with would that be a better verbiage? Could we all agree with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Ms. Peterson?
I think that this, again, beckons back to the beginning. I think there has to be flexibility. I know that there were certain, I know Dr. Manning went through a whole kind of series of events. if we can meet at a time in which certain things can be done and we can operate with respect and understanding that these are operational meetings, I don't think that we would be here. So I do think that we need to try to encourage communication and collaboration, but we also have to, if there's short windows of time that occur, that the availability is there, then with that, yes, concessions can be made, but with the understanding that because this cannot be done, that if we need to do X, Y, and Z, that we figure out a way to communicate after. So for instance, if we have to meet on Wednesday, and that's the only day that we can meet is Wednesday, then if there are changes that are needed to the agenda for personnel on Friday and Monday, that those be given, and if there's questions, that they can be added. I think where the breakdown is that, okay, nope, they can't be added. What you gave me on Wednesday is it. And I can tell you from a board meeting, I think even up to yesterday, until the moment that we posted it or it was given out, there are changes of adds and deletions around a current business and operations that we were trying to adjust. So I think that that's where this is. I don't know if I think that the line about the vice president and the deputy being invited, I think that that's important because we are people that can also bring a dialogue. But this next sentence, we should be able to be flexible on both sides.
I agree. Mr. Howard?
I guess my concern is this. So the original policy states who should be at the agenda setting meeting: superintendent, the board clerk, board president. It never says who should not be in the board meetings. Never says who not should be in the agenda setting meetings. I think there's a lot of verbiage, there's a lot of stuff that's really gonna cornhole us down the line. We're saying it's too much being said. If you wanna invite the deputy superintendent, you wanna invite the board vice president, make the invitation. Why are we putting this in policy? I don't get it, why we're adding to it. The policy that's currently stated is that the agenda session meeting should be between the superintendent, board president, and the board clerk. It does not say who cannot be there. So if the board clerk, board president, and the board superintendent, you want to invite your deputy, you want to invite your vice president, do so. Why are we putting this in policy?
Ms. Boucher?
So my concern is we haven't had an agenda setting meeting for the last 2 or 3 meetings. So the issue that I see in every meeting is the communication. And I'll be honest about it. There is a disconnect between having conversations with the president and the district. Again, there's no policy that says we have to have an agenda setting meeting. So taking out that last line, I get it, that's a rough line. But now, in this policy, my interpretation, and this is what we talked about, is that there will be an agenda setting meeting. Because we haven't had one in the last 2 to 3 weeks, and I'm not sure if that's just because there was again, it's all communication. You're right.
So my question would be this. I know for the last year or two, the board vice president and deputy have always been at those meetings. Why have you not been at the meetings? Were you not invited?
So the first one I was not, and then I had asked if I could be. So I made that request.
You had to ask.
Yes, in this circumstance.
So the president did not include you?
I believe she was going per the policy, if I'm not mistaken.
Per what policy? It doesn't say you cannot be there.
Right, but it doesn't say can.
So she didn't invite you?
No one did.
Excuse me?
No one did. It was had and I didn't even know there was one.
But if you're going to be invited, you're going to be invited by the board president.
Per this, yes.
So she did not invite you?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Peterson?
So I think, and I do agree that the communication is the biggest issue. And I do think that the business of the district still has to move forward with or without agenda setting. I do think it does improve communication and collaboration. If the window of agenda setting is given and the superintendent cannot fit within that, that's why the agenda setting is not happening. So I definitely think that collaboration needs to be done and probably a revisit and a conversation.
And the next one is, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. DeRay.
Just as a comment, while I was board president, I never, ever had a problem going to an agenda setting meeting. The clerk would contact me at the beginning of the week, give me a couple of times that the superintendent was available. We either did it remotely, with the vice president, in case I couldn't make the next meeting, the vice president was filled in on what was going on so they could take over if necessary. Why this is so difficult is beyond me. It really is. The superintendent is the CEO of basically a billion-dollar corporation, if you want to throw the bond in there. And everything we've done tonight, as we've continued to waste the taxpayers' time and mine, and everyone around the table, every one of these is, how could I put my thumb on the superintendent and get her under control? That's in the white letters. That's what this says. How could I get the superintendent under control? That's not the relationship. I'm talking. The relationship is, it's supposed to be a collaborative effort to benefit the public. That's what's supposed to be happening here. And yet, two adults, one of them is CEO of a billion-dollar corporation, and one of them, and I really respect you for running your own business. That's the hardest thing in the world. But the two of you, and you have to move a bit too, have to be able to get in the same room and set the agenda. You have to be there. Victoria has to be there. You represent these people over here. We're not having an agenda setting without the board president. What's the use of that?
I agree.
But you have to move. And we've been doing this months, and we still can't get it right. So I'll say, you're not able to move. And that's really sad.
It's on the contrary. Ms. Politi.
I concur with my colleague, John, and I think that a few of us here do, and it's really scary because all of this micromanagement and overstepping of power is documented. It's documented on the board agendas on the website. It's documented on YouTube. And not too long ago, there was a superintendent here who walked away with $600,000 due to bad board behavior. And I apologize to any board members that I may be offending, but I don't want to be a part of another superintendent walking away with a big package. And make no mistake, it will be a lot bigger than what the former superintendent walked away with.
To clarify, no one is trying to micromanage. We are trying to be flexible. I offered over 10 different
You can keep
times.
selling, I'm not buying.
Okay, well, the policies that we put in place were local policies, and the reason I did it is because so that our board could function more proficiently. Without the agenda setting meeting, it's tough because I can submit an agenda via email. And I say in every submission, please, if you have questions, please call me. Don't hesitate to contact me. No one contacts me. Then we get to the board meeting, and then they act like it's total outrage when they never made any effort to ask me any questions.
We're wasting a lot of time with a pity party here, and I'd like to move on. But know that you've been put on notice that you will be the board president who's in the headlines if you push this superintendent out.
No one is trying to push her out.
Point of order, let's move on.
Mr. Dory said that if he wasn't there, the vice president could go. So why can't you communicate with the vice president that they can go?
You're out of order, ma'am. Okay. Oh, Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. So the last thing I will say on this is, it is very disturbing because if we go back to July, when you were voted president, and I went back and I looked, every meeting under your section have been items that were put in place to do exactly what Mr. DeRay said. You've been trying to control to control the superintendent. Because my question to you is this: how do your items impact student achievement? Or I want you to go back to your section of the meeting for the last 2 months, 3 months, and tell me what items were about students. And I challenge you to find more than 2.
Anyone else? Okay. The next item, 6.5, is special meetings. And that was basically no changes except to add the definition of a special meeting. Any discussion? Oh, Mr. Bugarelli.
Thank you, Madam President. To define special meetings, that's already defined in the NISBA handbook under special meetings, isn't it? So,
That's where this came from.
so we're just adding it even though it's already
I wanted it in the policy.
Is it necessary to have in the policy, Mr. Shaw, according to, what we already have documentation from NISBA saying? I mean, I don't, understand why we're being duplicitous.
I don't know that it matters particularly. This is very consistent with what's in the NISBA handbook.
Any other discussion on this? Okay. Okay. Resolution 6.6 to approve Board of Education Committee membership. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
I'll turn it over to the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda tonight, we have items 7.1 through 7.14 for your consideration on consent.
That's through 7.15, right? 7.15? Oh, that's taken off. Okay, okay. Thank you. Okay, does anyone want to separate any out? Ms. Boucher?
7.2, please.
And I would like to separate out 7.1, item H, line 1 and 2, and 7.3.
So point of order on 7.1 H2, that would have to be,
Item H.
you would have to pull out the whole 7.1 and then offer an amendment. Because you can't just pull out a particular item from 7.1 H. You would have to pull out 7.1 and then amend it to pull that out, that's all. It can't be voted on separately by just pulling it out. So if you wanted a 7.1 H, 1?
1 and 2.
1 and 2, yeah, so that would have to be motions and seconded. So you just have to separate out 7.1 as itself and then a motion to amend 7.1. So if you want to do what you want to do, separate out 7.1 and then entertain a motion on the rest of the items and then go back to 7.1.
Can we take out 7.1, please?
So I have separated out 7.1 and 7.2
And 7.3.
and 7.3. Yep. So entertain a motion on 7.4 through 7.14.
Okay, can I have a motion on 7.4 through 7.14? And a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray? Yes. Mr. Howard? Yes. Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Now what?
So you'd have to entertain a motion on 7.1, and then somebody would have to move, then you would have to take a motion to amend 7.1 to take out items H, lines 1 and 2.
Okay, I'll make a motion to amend
Madam President, motion to table until we come after exec for item 7.1.
Point of order, that comes in after it's on the table.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Okay, 7.1. Can I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Madam
like to-
President, motion to table item 7.1 until we come out of exec, please.
So moved. Second.
Okay, roll call.
This is the roll call to table 7.1. Mr. Bergarelli,
Yes.
Mr. DeRay,
Yes.
Mr. Howard, Ms. Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello,
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello.
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher.
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher.
Yes.
Item 7.2. Can I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
I'd like to make a motion to table this till after executive session.
Can I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Motion to table 7.2. Mr. DeRay,
Yes.
Mr. Howard. Yes. Ms. Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello,
Yes.
Thomasina Bello.
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher.
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher.
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli.
Yes.
7.3. Can I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Discussion. Okay. Oh, Mr. Bugarelli?
Yeah, a member of the public had brought this on up and wanted a description of the duties of this person. If we could have those read out, possibly?
I don't have the job description with me. I can broadly tell you that a principal clerk position is one of the higher level clerical positions. We start with clerk, we go to senior clerk, then we go to principal clerk. One of the questions raised in open session was, does it include supervision? It does. That's one of the components of a principal anything, basically, in civil service, is that they have a supervisory piece of their job. Also, their tasks will be some financial tasks, but we already have a senior account clerk in food service, so the bulk of the fiscal activities fall within the purview of that person. These would be higher level clerical skills, analyzing data for that department. Ms. Roaring, you have anything that I'm missing? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Peterson.
I think in discussions, what we've been having in terms of looking at civil services positions, looking at the tasks associated and what the district need is. So we've been really looking at those administrative positions to make sure they're staffed appropriately to support the size of our operation. For many years, we've just kind of reposted. I know Ms. Limer is so joyful when I come to her office and say, okay, we may need to speak to Michelle Mills about this because we need to look at the positions that we're creating and that we have and to make sure they're appropriate for our district. So this is one of those such moves where we're saying we need support in supervision, we need support in data management and data analysis around food services, and that is not going to be satisfied with the current position that we had.
Ms. Boucher?
You can just not answer me if I'm not allowed to ask this question, but what happens to the current position once this is there?
At some point, we will come to you with an abolishment.
Ms. Peterson?
And I think that what you're asking is, and probably not the position, this ad does not result in a layoff.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, roll call. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Boucher?
I just need some further clarification, just because we did receive the checks. So my question is, cafeteria fund, is that its own account, or is that just out of the general fund?
Cafeteria fund is separate and distinct from the general fund, which is separate and distinct from the library fund and several other funds that we have.
Roll call.
7.3 roll call. Mr. Howard. Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yeah.
Ms. Christine Bello?
No.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
No.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay?
Yes.
Okay. That's it then.
And that concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to the Assistant Superintendent of Finance.
Wait, did you, 7? The Finance Division has items 8.1 to 8.6 this evening for consideration.
Does anyone want to separate any out? Ms. Politi?
Motion to table 8.4. Sorry, separate 8.4.
Okay. Anyone, Mr. DeRay?
8.6.
And 8.6. Mr. Stewart?
8.1.
Okay. Okay, can I have a motion for 8.2, 8.3, and 8.5?
So moved.
And a second. Discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Resolution 8.1, can I have a motion?
So moved.
And in a second, okay. Discussion? Mr. Stewart?
Yes, on warrant 81, we have, see if I can make this larger here. Dell Marketing LP, we have an amount of $1,326,000.
I don't know if you got the communication. So this fund, I know that Mrs. Roaring spoke about different funds. This is from the special aid fund, which is a part of our ARP one-time funding. So the purchase of Chromebooks were a part of that one-time funding, and this is the purchase of those Chromebooks. We also did, in our budget process, did allocate for Chromebooks, but usually we purchase in the spring for the fall. So we have to verify inventory and we have to make sure we have everything together before we issue the payment. So that's why we're seeing it at this time of the year.
Mr. Stewart?
So on the special aid fund, you don't need board approval or anything, you just spend that money as you need?
So with purchases of technology, it's under state aid contract. So districts have certain vendors where it's at the lowest minimum price and they bid out that process, and that is that procurement process.
Ms. Boucher?
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe last year, it was brought to the board to vote for the lowest bidder for the Dell computers.
I would have to look. I'm pretty sure it was.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
I had a question on warrant 90 and then 92. So I'm noticing that BOCES is coming out of general fund as well as special aid. Can you attest to that?
So special aid, we definitely, special aid and general fund at times fund special education, depending on the services and depending on the allocation. The federal government does give us money to fund special aid services to some extent.
Anyone else? Okay, roll call.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
So as a part of, just as another note, I know that Mrs. Roaring spoke this evening about the budget process. So as a part of the budget process, we talk about federal funding and what that is within our budget process. So at that time, if there's questions regarding funds and different things that, you know, we'll definitely review. But that is a part of the budget development process as well.
Resolution 8.4, can I have a motion?
Motion to table.
The point of order, it has to be on the floor first and then you can table that. Motion on the floor for 8.4.
So moved.
So, and a second?
Second.
Okay.
Now, motion to table.
So moved.
Roll call.
Can I
Roll
just
call
clarify, is this for after exec? Or just a table in general?
No, just to table in general.
Got it.
Roll call to table, Ms. Christine Bello,
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello,
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher,
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Duray,
Yes.
Mr. Howard, Ms. Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Resolution 8.6, can I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Duray?
I would like to table this resolution pending further discussion.
Can I have a second?
So moved.
And roll call.
Tabling 8.6, Ms. Thomasina Bello,
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher,
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Duray,
Yes.
Mr. Howard, Ms. Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello.
Yes.
That concludes my items.
And now we'll turn it over to the Assistant Superintendent, CIO, DPO.
So I hope this is the last time I have one resolution. I am ready to give it up those 6 letters attached to the end of my title. So there is items 9.1 for your consideration. To 9.1.
Can I have a motion
Second.
and discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher,
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Duray,
Yes.
Mr. Howard, Ms. Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello,
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Elementary.
That would have been terrible if on your last go around they voted you down. That wouldn't have been kind. The Office of Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction Elementary presents item 10.1 for your consent. I'm sorry, for your consideration upon consent.
Can I have a motion
So moved.
Second.
and discussion? Ms. Boucher?
Hi. So can you just give a little bit of background about what the IB workshop is? I also had some question on how many, if you can speak to it, how many current teachers and staff are trained on this already? Have we done this before? Have people gone to it before? And then maybe a little bit of a background of how you're going to implement this in the school once you return.
So just, so this predates me and I'm not implementing. It exists. However, through transitional changes, it's languished a bit. And so with new leadership, it's really important. This is the International Baccalaureate program it has a lot of cachet. And it's a part of basically differentiating our instruction, right, as a school district. And so what we need is a refresher, because if we're going to implement this with fidelity, we need to understand it better. And Ms. Peterson can comment further, because like I said, I inherited this. Not that that's an excuse, but we definitely want to brush up on it.
Ms. Peterson?
We need to breathe life into our IB program if we're continuing to invest in it. And I think exploration is needed about what it would cost and what refreshers would be needing for teachers. We do feel that IB does align itself with many of the culturally sustaining framework, welcoming and affirming environments. It has embedded SEL, so it's a wonderful program that we would like to replicate, but then what is that going to cost? And it's important for us to have an understanding of that as we go through the budget process and whether or not we want to continue it. So we need to breathe a little life into it right now.
Ms. Politi?
I can speak a little bit to the IB program, having 4 children who have gone through that program. I can't say enough good things about it as an educator. I would love for it to extend into the middle years on the high school program, because honestly, an IB diploma trumps any AP diploma or honors level that you can have because the rigor is there. And it really embeds a global culture of acceptance at a very young age. They learn a second language. It's all project-based learning. They learn how to present as early as kindergarten in front of their peers. And we have not refreshed this program. No one's been to training, and it's been a big issue with me since prior to COVID. And if we don't start sending people there, we're gonna lose certification by default. And not only that, it's at a school that's our one true neighborhood school. It's at Horizons. And it was a brilliant place to put it there because that can be a school that can have a tremendous turnaround. And you see parents who are savvy and in the know are like, yeah, I want my kids to go there. And you really see a wonderful, diverse culture there as well. So thank you for that. I appreciate
my
that.
pleasure.
I have a question. These conferences, can any of them be done remotely? Ms. Peterson?
I know that we spoke about ways in which we need to look at what is offered in ways that we can do virtual, we can. For this program in particular, I think that because of the extent of which curriculum is reviewed, different practices in the program, it is important for the members participating to participate in person.
Ms. Boucher?
So again, I have a question in retention. So is there any way to assure that when someone goes to PD and we're doing this, that they are staying with the district for a duration of a certain amount of time? So like if you come get the training and then, not you personally, but I'm saying if someone does.
You're stuck with me for a little while.
But if they receive the training and then leave, is there anything that we have about that?
That would be a part of bargaining. I can't mandate someone stay. I wish I could. I can't.
But I do have a response. We hope that we're working, Dr. Soto and I, in service of eliminating barriers to sharing best practices. And so just because it would be me and Ms. Nieves attending the conference doesn't mean that the information would live with us. In fact, that would be awful, right? And so we would turnkey the information and share best practices and then hopefully catalyze more involvement in other IB, maybe even remote. Once we have that basis of understanding, then maybe we can move towards some remote options. But just because someone would leave, hopefully that we're implementing some best practices, sharing of best practices so that we can sustain this.
It's actually a little shocking that it's been since before COVID.
Ms. Paletti?
Yeah, I'd just like to speak on PD too. And I know looking at this on a screen, it looks like it's a lot of money, right? But I just was recently very privileged to attend professional development through my district in Atlanta, Georgia. And I have to say, as an educator for 23 years, I walked away feeling very refreshed, very inspired. And these are things that we need to promote. This is what gets our teachers wanting to do the best that they can for our kids. It's important.
Mr. Duray?
I'd like to echo those comments also. Just from the opposite of what you said, the lack of training would lead to people leaving. Mm-hmm. People need to go to professional development, PD. And there's no substitute for going to a conference and meeting people from all different districts, I'm certain, across the United States. And that's when you actually learn the most at lunch, believe it or not. You sit there, you meet people, you make contacts. There's no substitute for that that can be found online. Mm-hmm. So I will say when I came to the board and I was new, I would identify conferences as a target. And I don't think that's really fair for the reasons I just said. We need to develop the teachers, going back to the beginning of the night. How do you retain good help? You train them, you make them feel special. My only concern at the time was when they come back, and you already addressed this, share the information. How do we get that information out to the rest of the faculty so that they didn't go to the conference, but they could learn what other people learned from the conference. So a lot of talking, but I think these are special, and we should continue it.
Okay, roll call.
Miss Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Duray,
Yes.
Mr. Howard, Miss Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Miss Christine Bello,
No.
Miss Thomasina Bello,
No.
Miss Mackenzie Boucher.
Yes.
That concludes my items, but I'm also going to speak on behalf of my colleague for the next one, if you'd like me to just keep going.
Go ahead.
So on behalf of Dr. Soto and the Office of Curriculum and Instruction Secondary, we are presenting items 11.1 through 11.3 for your consideration on consent.
Does anyone want to separate any out? Ms. Boucher?
11.1.
Okay. Okay, can I have a motion on 11.2 and 11.3?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Bergarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Duray.
Yes.
Mr. Howard. Yes. Miss Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Miss Christine Bello,
Yes.
Thomasina Bello,
Yes.
Miss Mackenzie Boucher,
Yes.
Miss Victoria Boucher.
Yes.
Item 11.1, can I have a motion
So moved. Second.
and discussion? Ms. Boucher?
So the second conference on here is for a music teacher to go to the NISMA conference, but that was December 5th to December 8th. Is there any reason that this wasn't brought before the board during the last meeting? And did the person go, which we now subsequently will have to approve if they did go because it's passed?
Ms. Peterson?
I know that some of that was put in the admin content, and I'm just gonna log into the admin content so that I know. I know some of it, but I just wanna make sure that I'm in alignment regarding some of it. I know that some of it had to do with an incident, an emergency, and a switch had to be made, or the student couldn't attend.
So it's just a name switch, not a,
Yeah,
Okay.
there was an injury. Okay.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Duray,
Yes.
Mr. Howard. Yes. Miss Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Miss Christine Bello,
No.
Miss Thomasina Bello,
No.
Miss Mackenzie Boucher,
yes.
Miss Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli.
Yes.
That concludes our items. Oh, sorry,
Thank you.
I jumped the gun.
So now I'll turn it over to the Assistant Superintendent of Exceptional Learners, Mr. Bear.
Thank you, Madam President. The Exceptional Learner Division has item 12.1 for the board's consideration.
Can I have a motion for item 12.1 and a second? Second. Okay. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Howard. Yes. Miss Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Miss Christine Bello,
Yes.
Miss Thomasina Bello,
Yes.
Miss Mackenzie Boucher,
Yes.
Miss Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Duray.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Madam President, you would have to entertain a motion on be it resolved that the board hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose. Matters leading to the employment of particular individuals and to obtain advice from legal counsel.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call? Oh. Just so you know, the board may take action after executive session. Roll call?
Miss Mackenzie Boucher,
Yes.
Miss Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli.
Yes.
Mr. Duray.
Yes.
Mr. Howard. Miss Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Miss Christine Bello,
Yes.
Miss Thomasina Bello.
Yes.
Okay, can I have a motion for 7.1 and a second?
Second.
We did, back there. Okay, motion and a second. Okay. I'd like to make a motion to amend 7.1 to separate item H, line 1 and 2. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
A second. A second, I made the motion second. Okay, so now we're going to vote on 7.1 as amended. Roll call? Oh, vote on,
So on the
okay.
floor is 7-1 separated out H1 and 2. So you have to vote on, are we separated out H1 and 2?
Okay. Okay. Roll call?
Miss Christine Bello?
Yes.
Miss Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Miss Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Miss Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
No.
Mr. Duray?
No.
Mr. Howard? No. Miss Politti?
No.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Okay, now,
You have the point, you're voting a roll call on 7-1 minus H1 and 2.
roll call on 7.1 as amended.
Miss Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Miss Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Miss Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
No.
Mr. Duray?
No.
Mr. Howard? Miss Politti?
No.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Miss Christine Bello?
Yes.
So 7-1 fails.
Okay, so
Wait,
now.
did you?
Mr. Stewart, did you vote yes?
7-1 passed.
Did you vote yes?
I said yes.
So 7-1 passes.
Okay, so now,
So now you need to entertain a motion on H1 and 2.
okay, can I have a motion on H?
Point of order, can we have discussion?
I didn't, we need to put it on the floor first. Can I have a motion on item H, line 1 and 2?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Yes, I do want discussion. I'd like to point out that you are not an educator, you are not human resources, you are not a principal in this district, and you are again proving that you are overstepping your role as trustee and as board president by doing this. Your personal feelings do not dictate the business of this district.
Discussion. So these are the recommendations of the superintendent, correct? Through human resources?
Yes.
They are. So the recommendation is for these individuals to be hired.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. DeRay?
Could you explain the hiring process a little bit for us? What brought this applicant to this point?
So we post occasionally for all kinds of different substitute positions. So they get collected by my staff. I review them initially for particular things, make sure the social security numbers are there, you know, basic kind of things. There are reference checks done, and then we submit fingerprints for clearance. Once I've gathered all that information, then my report goes to the superintendent to say that this is all cleared. You can feel comfortable making that recommendation to the board.
Mr. Howard?
So no red flags? Nothing in that process, along that process would, nothing along that process came back negative?
No.
Thank you.
Mr. DeRay?
Just so I understand the process, it goes directly from you to the superintendent? There's no
I look at it.
group what's the interviewing process?
It depends on what division. It's in buildings and grounds. We'll do some of the interviews, food service, security, and then I do the rest. And what we've started to do recently is to do them remotely because it's easier frankly, it's easier for me. And it's a lot easier for other folks just to do it remotely.
without putting you on the spot, were you comfortable with moving this applicant on?
Yes.
Okay. How many years of experience do you have in HR?
24.
Okay.
Mr. Bugarelli?
The superintendent, how many years of experience does the superintendent have in education?
29 or 28 years.
Okay, so let's round it out at 50 years combined, plus the interviewing process. Ms. Bella, how many years of experience do you have hiring educational people? 0. It's a question.
Ms. Peterson?
So I just want to make sure that the board is aware all recommendations for employment are made by the superintendent of the schools. So we work in her stead as executive cabinet to make sure that we're facilitating the process of employment. So we go through interviews, we do background checks, we check references, we hold committees, and it is a shared decision-making part, the interview process, which we are reminded if we do not do parts of that process, we have people that hold us accountable for that part of it. So before any candidate in this entire list gets here, we go through those steps. And then recommendations are made to the superintendent, who is in charge of the day-to-day operations of the district.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Thank you. So we had board members say they wouldn't hire executive came-up positions because we need teachers and teachers' aides. Here we have somebody applying and approved to be a teacher's aide. We were blasted on a budget, and budget initially voted down because we were getting rid of positions. We didn't fire anybody, but yet here we have a teacher's aide applying a position. Teacher's aide who, the position she applied for, Human Resources says thumbs up, superintendent says thumbs up, and we're considering not hiring her because some people don't like her personally, I guess. I don't understand it. We have someone qualified for the position. That's really all as far as it needs to go.
Roll call.
Miss Mackenzie Boucher,
I abstain.
Miss Victoria Boucher,
I abstain.
Mr. Bergarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Duray,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Abstain.
Ms. Christine Bello,
Abstain.
Ms. Thomasina Bello.
Abstain.
That motion fails.
Mr. Point of order. Mr. Shaw, can you give me a ruling on abstentions? What is, through NESBA, through state education, what do they say in regards to abstentions on the board level? When can they not, should they not be used?
Does the board have a consensus for me to give an opinion about that?
Yes.
Can you take a roll call on that?
Roll call to let Mr. Shaw give an opinion.
Ms. Christine Bello, Ms.
Yes.
Thomasina Bello,
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher.
Yes.
Mr. Victoria Boucher.
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli.
Yes.
Mr. Duray, Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Ms. Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
As a general rule, people should not be abstaining. They should be voting yes or no. However, there are times when there is not enough information, or the person is new and didn't have background, when there is an abstention. When it comes to voting tenure, for example, if someone says that philosophically I oppose tenure, I'll never vote to tenure anyone. The commissioner will remove for that. But generally, it's frowned upon. If you have enough knowledge, you should vote yes or no. That's why you're on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Okay, item 7.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm
I'm
sorry.
just curious, based on Mr. Shaw's explanation that no one in the room qualifies to abstain, would anybody like to reconsider their vote?
Also noting that it could be a penalty for grounds for removal from the commissioner. Still, no one reconsidering their abstentions.
Mr. Howard.
just for clarification, Mr. Shaw, so if you don't meet the threshold of what you just described, then you should vote yes or no, correct?
If you have enough information, you're informed, it's expected to vote yes or no.
Thank you.
Ms. Boucher?
What if there's a conflict of interest?
Conflict of interest has a very specific definition under the general municipal law, and one would have to explore which of the bases under that article of the general municipal law the person believes a conflict exists.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you can't abstain just to not be a part of the record of voting yes or no?
I really have nothing further to give as an opinion. I've said it a couple of
Thank you.
times.
Excuse me.
Ms. Boucher?
To confirm, you said expected, not required, right?
I did say expected.
Mr. DeRay?
Last comment for the evening. Thank you. From a philosophical point of view, nobody that voted to abstain was elected to sit on the sidelines. They were elected to be on the field, and you guys just decided, I'm going to be on the sidelines, and that's very disappointing.
Okay, so resolution 7.2, can I have a motion
So moved.
and a second? Discussion? 7.2. Okay. Okay, roll call.
Roll call on 7-2. Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Yes. Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello? Ms.
Yes.
Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
That's it. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. I have it. Second. Roll call.
Mr. Bergarelli?
No.
Mr. DeRay? Mr. Howard? Ms. Politi?
No.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.